The illusion of explanatory depth is a cognitive bias where we believe we understand complex processes far better than we actually do. Consider how confidently you might claim to understand the mechanics of a zipper, the inner workings of a toilet, or even the engine of a car. Many of us assume that our everyday experiences with these objects equate to deep understanding. However, when pressed to explain the intricate details behind how these systems work, we quickly discover that our knowledge is more superficial than we initially thought. Our brains are wired to form simplified mental models of complex systems. When we first encounter something new, we create an overview, a rough sketch that captures the main idea without delving into the finer points. This mental shortcut is efficient. It allows us to function without getting bogged down by every underlying detail. Yet this efficiency comes at a cost. It can lead us to overestimate the depth of our understanding. Just as learning to ride a bicycle involves mastering the basic skill without fully comprehending the physics of balance, we often navigate our world with an incomplete picture of how things really work. Research in cognitive psychology has demonstrated this gap between perceived and actual knowledge. In classic experiments, participants were asked to explain how various common devices operated. Initially, they expressed high confidence in their understanding. However, when required to provide detailed, step-by-step explanations, many stumbled, revealing that their comprehension was based on a simplified, almost superficial grasp of the subject. This phenomenon isn't a trivial quirk. It has significant implications for how we evaluate our own knowledge and make decisions based on that self-assessment. In educational settings, the illusion of explanatory depth can be particularly problematic. Students might listen to a lecture or read a textbook and feel they have mastered the material. Yet when it comes time to apply that knowledge in practical situations or answer probing questions, the gaps in their understanding become apparent. This overconfidence can lead to underpreparedness in exams and real-world problem-solving scenarios. The lesson here is that true understanding requires actively questioning and testing our knowledge, not just passively absorbing information. The implications of this cognitive bias extend into the professional realm as well. Decision-makers and experts in various fields may overestimate their grasp of multifaceted issues like economic trends, technological systems, or environmental challenges. When policymakers or business leaders assume they fully understand these complex systems, they risk implementing oversimplified solutions that fail to address the underlying issues. For example, a policymaker might rely on high-level statistics or popular narratives, convinced of their comprehensive understanding, only to later find that critical nuances were overlooked. The consequence can be far-reaching, leading to policies or strategies that are ill-equipped to handle real-world complexities. On a personal level, coming to terms with the illusion of explanatory depth can be both humbling and transformative. Recognizing that our confidence in our own understanding might be misplaced encourages intellectual humility. It prompts us to ask more questions, seek out additional information, and engage in deeper learning rather than settling for surface-level explanations. This attitude not only enriches our personal growth, but also fosters more informed and meaningful discussions in our communities. In today's fast-paced world, where information is both abundant and often oversimplified, acknowledging this cognitive bias is more important than ever. We are constantly bombarded with sound bites, headlines, and summaries, that give us the impression of comprehensive knowledge. Yet, beneath this veneer lies a complex web of details and mechanisms that we may never fully grasp unless we make a conscious effort to explore them. Recognizing that our initial understanding is only a starting point can help us cultivate a more nuanced perspective on the issues that affect our lives. Ultimately, the illusion of explanatory depth serves as a powerful reminder of the limits of our own knowledge. It teaches us that while it's natural to feel confident about what we think we know, true expertise demands a continuous commitment to learning and self-examination. Whether we're navigating everyday tasks, studying new concepts, or making critical decisions in our professional lives, it's essential to question our assumptions and remain open to deeper inquiry. Embracing this mindset not only enhances our personal growth, but also leads to more thoughtful, informed decision-making in every area of life. Share where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. If you enjoy these reflections, consider subscribing to SleepDialect. Sit back, relax, and let your imagination run wild as we continue our captivating journey. The bias blind spot is a fascinating psychological phenomenon where we are quick to notice cognitive distortions and biases in others while remaining unaware of these same distortions in ourselves. It's ironic that despite our best efforts to be objective, we often consider ourselves immune to the very biases that we can easily spot in other people. This tendency is rooted in our desire to see ourselves as fair, rational, and in control, even when our judgments are subtly influenced by factors that we don't consciously recognize. In everyday life, the bias blind spot shows up in many ways. Consider a conversation about politics. It's common for someone to point out that a friend's opinion is skewed by personal bias, while failing to acknowledge that their own views might be similarly influenced. This isn't just limited to political beliefs. In academic settings, colleagues might critique each other's interpretations of data or conclusions, yet few take a hard look at the assumptions underlying their own reasoning. Even in personal relationships, we may quickly spot our partner's tendency to misinterpret a situation or jump to conclusions, without considering that we too might be falling prey to the same cognitive shortcuts. Research in social psychology has demonstrated that the bias blind spot is a widespread and robust effect. Studies have shown that when people are asked to evaluate the objectivity of their own opinions versus those of others, they consistently rate themselves as being less biased. This self-enhancement likely stems from a combination of introspection limits and a reluctance to see oneself in a negative light. After all, acknowledging our own biases would mean accepting that we are not as rational or fair-minded as we'd like to think, which can be a hard pill to swallow for our self-image. The implications of the bias blind spot extend far beyond personal interactions. In professional settings, leaders and decision-makers who fail to recognize their own biases may make poor choices, relying on assumptions that are neither fully examined nor critically challenged. When such individuals are convinced of their objectivity, they are less likely to seek out opposing viewpoints or constructive feedback. This can lead to groupthink, where alternative perspectives are ignored and decisions are made on the basis of incomplete information. In public policy, this may result in oversimplified solutions that do not account for the complex interplay of factors affecting societal issues. Moreover, the bias blind spot can exacerbate conflicts and misunderstandings. When individuals are convinced that others are biased, while they themselves are above reproach, it creates a fertile ground for mistrust and polarization. This dynamic often emerges in heated debates, where each side accuses the other of irrationality and prejudice. Instead of engaging in open dialogue that could lead to mutual understanding, people become entrenched in their positions, convinced that any disagreement is simply evidence of the other party's flawed judgment. Addressing the bias blind spot requires a conscious effort to recognize and mitigate our own cognitive limitations. One approach is to actively seek out feedback from others, inviting criticism that challenges our assumptions. By listening to diverse perspectives, we can begin to see the blind spots in our thinking and appreciate the complexity of issues that we might have otherwise oversimplified. Another strategy involves cultivating mindfulness, a deliberate practice of examining our thoughts and decisions without judgment. This self-reflection can help us identify when we are relying on heuristics or shortcuts that might lead us astray. Educational programs and training sessions in critical thinking are also valuable tools for reducing the impact of the bias blind spot. These initiatives encourage individuals to question their assumptions and engage in metacognition, or thinking about their own thinking. By learning about common cognitive biases and understanding the psychological mechanisms behind them, we can develop a healthier skepticism about our own judgments. Ultimately, this awareness can lead to more thoughtful decision-making and improved interpersonal relationships. It is important to remember that having a bias blind spot does not mean we are inherently flawed or incapable of rational thought. Instead, it is a natural aspect of human cognition, one that we can learn to manage with effort and humility. Recognizing that we are all susceptible to biases is the first step towards a more balanced and reflective approach to how we form opinions and make decisions. Embracing this understanding allows us to be more forgiving of ourselves and others when mistakes are made, and it fosters an environment where continuous learning and improvement are valued over the illusion of complete objectivity. In a world where information is abundant and opinions are plentiful, overcoming the bias blind spot is more crucial than ever. As we navigate complex issues in our personal and professional lives, being mindful of our own limitations can help us avoid the pitfalls of overconfidence and misjudgment. By striving to see beyond our immediate perceptions and actively challenging our assumptions, we not only improve our own decision-making processes, but also contribute to a more thoughtful and understanding society. The Semmelweis Reflex refers to the instinctive rejection of new information or ideas that contradict established beliefs, a phenomenon named after Ignaz Semmelweis, a 19th century Hungarian physician whose groundbreaking discovery challenged the prevailing medical dogma of his time. Semmelweis observed that hand-washing dramatically reduced the incidence of puerperal fever in maternity wards, yet his evidence was met with fierce resistance by the medical community, which was deeply invested in traditional practices. This historical episode serves as a stark reminder of how even well-supported innovations can be dismissed simply because they disrupt the familiar and comfortable frameworks of accepted knowledge. At its core, the Semmelweis Reflex is a reflection of our innate preference for certainty over uncertainty. People tend to cling to ideas that have been reinforced by tradition or long-standing practice, finding safety in what is known and familiar. When confronted with evidence that challenges these entrenched beliefs, our initial reaction is often one of denial or dismissal rather than curiosity. This reaction isn't necessarily a deliberate or malicious choice. It is a subconscious mechanism designed to protect our self-identity and sense of security. After all, admitting that a long-held belief might be wrong can feel like an admission of personal fallibility, something many of us are reluctant to face. This cognitive bias is not confined to the realm of medicine. It is evident in various aspects of life, from our personal habits and social norms to large-scale institutional practices. In science and technology, for example, revolutionary ideas often meet with skepticism because they require a re-evaluation of established paradigms. Even when new research or innovative approaches are supported by robust data, they may be ignored or ridiculed if they challenge the status quo. The reluctance to accept new information can slow progress and, in some cases, lead to harmful consequences when outdated practices continue to be followed despite evidence to the contrary. The underlying psychology of the Semmelweis Reflex is closely related to other cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias, where individuals tend to favor information that aligns with their pre-existing beliefs while disregarding conflicting evidence. This interplay of biases creates an environment in which new ideas are not given a fair hearing. Instead, they are quickly filtered through a lens that values tradition over truth. The result is a self-perpetuating cycle. The more we rely on established beliefs, the more we dismiss challenges to them, and the harder it becomes to introduce innovative thinking or necessary change. Overcoming the Semmelweis reflex requires a conscious effort to cultivate intellectual humility and openness. One of the first steps is acknowledging that our current understanding may be incomplete or even flawed. Embracing this possibility opens the door to learning, growth. It calls for an active search for evidence and a willingness to engage with ideas that unsettle our preconceived notions. In educational and professional settings, fostering a culture of critical thinking and open dialogue can be transformative. When individuals feel safe to question and challenge long-held assumptions, they pave the way for breakthroughs that can lead to significant improvements in practice and policy. In today's rapidly evolving world, the challenge of the Semmelweis reflex is more pertinent than ever. The digital age has democratized access to information, yet it has also amplified the tendency to seek out and cling to echo chambers where established views go unchallenged. Social media platforms and online communities often reinforce existing opinions, making it easier to dismiss alternative perspectives without giving them due consideration. The key to countering this trend lies in actively seeking diverse viewpoints and being willing to re-examine our beliefs in light of new evidence. This not only enriches our understanding, but also strengthens our capacity to make informed decisions in an increasingly complex world. The lessons drawn from Semmelweis's experience extend beyond academic or professional disciplines. They touch on the very way we interact with each other as human beings. When we reject new ideas out of hand, we limit our collective potential to innovate and solve problems. Whether in public policy, business strategy, or personal relationships, a rigid adherence to outdated beliefs can stifle progress and breed conflict. Recognizing the Semmelweis reflex in our own thinking is a critical step toward more constructive dialogue and collaboration. It encourages us to be more tolerant of ambiguity and more receptive to change, qualities that are essential in an ever-changing global landscape. Ultimately, the Semmelweis reflex serves as a powerful reminder that progress depends not on clinging to the familiar, but on the courage to explore uncharted territory. By challenging our biases and remaining open to new evidence, even when it contradicts what we have long held to be true, we not only honor the legacy of pioneers like Semmelweis, but also set the stage for future advancements. In doing so, we embrace a mindset that values continuous inquiry and recognizes that true understanding is always evolving. This openness to change is the cornerstone of innovation, the driving force behind societal improvement, and a testament to our capacity for growth in the face of uncertainty. The Ostrich Effect refers to the tendency to avoid or ignore unpleasant information by metaphorically burying one's head in the sand. This behavioral pattern can be observed in various aspects of life, from personal health to financial matters, where individuals choose to remain unaware of risks or negative developments rather than confront them. The idea behind the ostrich effect is that, in the short term, ignorance can feel less stressful than dealing with uncomfortable realities. However, this avoidance often leads to more significant problems down the line. At its core, the ostrich effect is a defense mechanism against anxiety and cognitive dissonance. When people are faced with information that challenges their current beliefs or highlights potential dangers, the natural response can be to shut down emotionally and avoid processing the details. This behavior is not necessarily deliberate. Rather, it is an unconscious strategy to minimize immediate psychological discomfort. For instance, someone might ignore early warning signs of a deteriorating financial situation because confronting the reality of potential losses creates stress and fear of failure. The phenomenon is particularly noticeable in the realm of personal finance. Many investors or savers may avoid checking their bank accounts or investment portfolios during economic downturns. By not looking, they temporarily shield themselves from the stress and anxiety that come with seeing their assets devalue. However, this short-term relief can result in a lack of timely decision-making, which might lead to even greater losses when proactive measures are delayed. In this way, the ostrich effect illustrates a paradox, where avoiding negative information only exacerbates the problem over time. Health is another area where the ostrich effect frequently manifests. People may postpone doctor visits or ignore early symptoms of an illness to avoid facing the possibility of a serious diagnosis. This avoidance can be harmful, as early detection of many conditions is critical for effective treatment. The reluctance to confront potentially distressing information about one's health is a clear example of how the ostrich effect, while offering a temporary escape from worry, ultimately undermines long-term well-being. It serves as a reminder that facing unpleasant truths, though challenging, is essential for taking the necessary steps toward improvement. Beyond personal scenarios, the ostrich effect can also be seen in organizational and societal contexts. In some businesses, management may avoid acknowledging systemic issues or negative trends within the company, preferring to maintain an appearance of stability and success. This avoidance can lead to decisions that are based on outdated or incomplete information, ultimately harming the organization's ability to adapt and thrive. Similarly, on a societal level, communities might ignore critical issues such as environmental degradation or public health concerns until the consequences become impossible to ignore. In these cases, the ostrich effect contributes to a collective inertia that hampers timely and effective responses to emerging challenges. Understanding the ostrich effect is crucial because it highlights a common human shortcoming: the preference for comfort over confrontation. While it may seem easier in the moment to ignore unpleasant truths, doing so can have far-reaching negative consequences. By avoiding the necessary but challenging task of confronting adverse information, individuals and organizations miss the opportunity to prepare for and mitigate potential problems. In many ways, the Ostrich Effect is a reminder that facing reality, no matter how uncomfortable, is a critical step toward growth and resilience. Addressing this bias requires a deliberate shift in mindset. One effective approach is to cultivate a habit of regular self-reflection and proactive information seeking. Instead of shying away from difficult facts, individuals can practice embracing them as a necessary part of making informed decisions. For example, setting aside dedicated time to review financial statements or health metrics can help transform what initially feels like a burdensome task into a manageable and even empowering routine. In a similar vein, organizations can encourage open dialogue and transparency, ensuring that potential issues are discussed and addressed before they escalate into crises. Ultimately, overcoming the ostrich effect involves building emotional resilience and developing the capacity to handle uncertainty and discomfort. It requires an acknowledgement that the short-term pain of facing difficult truths is often outweighed by the long-term benefits of preparedness and adaptability. Whether in personal finance, healthcare, or broader social issues, embracing rather than avoiding negative information paves the way for more effective problem-solving and better outcomes in the long run. Recognizing and addressing the ostrich effect is not about eliminating fear altogether, but about learning to manage it in a way that supports growth, innovation, and overall well-being. In conclusion, the ostrich effect serves as a powerful illustration of how our natural tendencies to avoid discomfort can lead us astray. By consciously choosing to face rather than ignore challenging information, we open ourselves up to the possibility of meaningful change and progress. While it may require courage and effort, the benefits of confronting reality head-on, be it in personal health, financial stability, or organizational success, are substantial. Ultimately, understanding and mitigating the ostrich effect is a critical step toward developing a more resilient, informed, and adaptive approach to life's inevitable challenges. Not invented, here syndrome refers to the tendency of individuals or organizations to dismiss or devalue ideas, products, or innovations that originate from outside their own group, even when those external contributions are of high quality or proven effectiveness. This behavior often stems from a deep-seated belief in the superiority of internally developed solutions and a wariness of external influences that might challenge established practices or undermine a sense of identity and control. It is not uncommon to see this phenomenon in corporate environments, where teams or departments become overly protective of their own processes and technologies, leading to resistance against adopting practices or solutions that have been validated elsewhere. At its core, not invented. Here syndrome is driven by a mix of cognitive biases, organizational pride, and a desire for self-reliance. When an organization or team invests significant time and resources in developing their own methods or technologies, they naturally develop an attachment to these creations. This attachment can transform into a bias, where even superior external solutions are rejected because they are seen as outsiders' ideas. The bias is compounded by the perception that using an external solution might imply a shortcoming in the organization's own ability to innovate. thereby threatening the collective ego and undermining a culture of self-sufficiency. The impact of this syndrome can be far-reaching. In industries that thrive on rapid technological advancements, clinging to internally developed ideas while ignoring or dismissing external innovations can lead to significant inefficiencies. Organizations might end up reinventing the wheel repeatedly, expending valuable resources on developing products or solutions that already exist and are perhaps even more effective. This not only slows down the pace of innovation, but also puts the organization at a competitive disadvantage, as competitors who are more open to external ideas can integrate the best available solutions into their operations more quickly. Moreover, not invented. Here syndrome can stifle collaboration and knowledge sharing within an organization. When employees or teams are encouraged to focus solely on their internal capabilities, they may become insular, creating silos that limit cross-pollination of ideas. This isolation can lead to a narrowing of perspectives, where the organization misses out on broader industry trends or innovative practices that could drive growth and improvement. In such an environment, the pursuit of perfection in in-house development can overshadow the practical benefits of integrating external insights, ultimately reducing the organization's agility in responding to market changes. In some cases, the roots of this syndrome may lie in past experiences where external ideas led to failures or did not mesh well with the organization's culture or systems. Such experiences can reinforce the belief that external contributions are inherently inferior or incompatible, even when that may not be the case. Additionally, the internal drive to protect proprietary technologies or unique methodologies can create a defensive posture where openness to external ideas is seen as a threat to the organization's competitive edge. This defensive stance is further reinforced by organizational politics, where departments may guard their turf, fearing that embracing external solutions could diminish their perceived value or influence. Despite these challenges, overcoming not invented. Here syndrome is essential for fostering a culture of innovation and continuous improvement. One effective approach is to cultivate an environment that values critical evaluation over blind loyalty to internal practices. By encouraging employees to assess ideas on their merit rather than their source, organizations can break down the barriers that prevent them from leveraging the best available solutions, regardless of where they originate. This involves creating platforms for open dialogue and collaboration, where external ideas are welcomed, scrutinized, and, if found valuable, seamlessly integrated into existing frameworks. Organizations that successfully counteract this bias often adopt strategies such as open innovation, where collaboration with external partners, startups, or academic institutions is not only encouraged but seen as a strategic asset. By engaging with a broader ecosystem of innovators, companies can access a wider range of perspectives and technologies that can drive competitive advantage. Such openness can also lead to mutual learning, where both internal teams and external collaborators benefit from the exchange of ideas, ultimately fostering a more dynamic and responsive organizational culture. On an individual level, combating not invented. Here syndrome requires a mindset shift towards intellectual humility and a willingness to acknowledge that no one group has a monopoly on good ideas, encouraging employees to remain curious and open-minded, and rewarding the critical assessment of all ideas, whether they come from within or outside the organization, can help create a more balanced approach to innovation. Training programs that focus on cognitive biases and decision-making can also play a crucial role in raising awareness about the pitfalls of dismissing external contributions and the value that diverse perspectives bring. Ultimately, addressing not invented. Here syndrome is about recognizing that innovation is rarely the product of isolated genius. It is often the result of collaboration, iteration, and the synthesis of diverse ideas from multiple sources. Organizations that embrace this reality are more likely to remain agile, resilient, and competitive in a rapidly changing world. By letting go of the notion that only internally generated ideas are valuable, and by actively seeking out and integrating external insights, organizations can unlock new levels of creativity and efficiency. Pro-innovation bias is a cognitive tendency where new ideas and technologies are embraced with excessive admiration, often leading individuals and organizations to overlook or minimize their potential shortcomings. This bias emerges from a deep-rooted enthusiasm for novelty and progress, where the allure of being at the forefront of innovation can overshadow critical evaluation. In a society that prizes rapid technological advancement and the promise of transformative change, the very qualities that drive progress can also blind us to the risks and limitations that accompany every new development. At its core, this bias is fueled by our inherent attraction to the new and unfamiliar. Humans are naturally inclined to seek out fresh experiences and ideas, and this curiosity is often reinforced by media portrayals and marketing narratives that celebrate innovation as a hallmark of success. When a new technology or idea emerges, it is frequently presented as a groundbreaking solution to long-standing problems, which can create a sense of excitement and urgency. This enthusiasm, while beneficial in spurring creativity and advancement, can also lead to an unbalanced focus on the positive aspects of an innovation, while potential drawbacks are relegated to the background or dismissed altogether. In the business world, pro-innovation bias is particularly evident. Companies and entrepreneurs often chase the next big breakthrough, sometimes at the expense of thorough risk assessment or long-term planning. The competitive drive to be seen as cutting edge can result in a rush to market with products or services that have not been fully vetted for reliability, security, or ethical considerations. High-profile examples in the tech industry illustrate this well. Products celebrated for their innovative features have later been criticized for issues such as privacy breaches, security vulnerabilities, or unsustainable business practices. The pressure to innovate can create an environment where the excitement of new possibilities eclipses the need for cautious and comprehensive evaluation. This bias is not confined solely to the corporate realm. It also influences public policy and social initiatives. Governments and institutions, eager to adopt modern solutions, may implement new technologies or methodologies without adequately weighing their long-term implications. For instance, policies that rely heavily on technological fixes for complex social or environmental issues can be propelled by the belief that innovation alone will lead to improvement. However, without a balanced analysis that considers potential side effects, such initiatives risk generating unintended consequences, ranging from economic disruptions to exacerbating social inequalities. The assumption that all that is new must be inherently beneficial can hinder the development of more nuanced and sustainable solutions. Everyday consumers are also susceptible to pro-innovation bias. The constant bombardment of advertisements and news stories about the latest gadgets, apps, and smart devices can create an almost irresistible pull towards the new. While these innovations often offer convenience and efficiency, they may also come with hidden costs such as reduced privacy, increased dependency on technology, or a steep learning curve that is not immediately apparent. The rush to adopt the newest trends can lead to situations where consumers invest in products without fully understanding their limitations or the broader implications of their use. This uncritical acceptance of novelty can contribute to a cycle where market trends are driven more by hype than by genuine improvements in quality or functionality. Overcoming pro-innovation bias requires cultivating a culture of critical thinking and balanced evaluation. One effective strategy is to encourage deliberate skepticism alongside enthusiasm for new ideas. This means setting up processes that rigorously assess both the advantages and the potential pitfalls of innovations before they are widely adopted. In a corporate setting, structured decision-making frameworks that include risk assessments and pilot testing phases can help ensure that the excitement for new technology does not outpace a thoughtful analysis of its long-term viability. Similarly, public policy initiatives can benefit from inclusive debates that incorporate diverse viewpoints, thereby highlighting potential issues that might otherwise be overlooked in the rush to innovate. Interdisciplinary collaboration is another powerful tool in mitigating this bias. When experts from different fields come together to evaluate an innovation, they bring varied perspectives that can challenge overly optimistic assumptions. For example, a technological innovation celebrated by engineers might raise valid concerns from ethicists, sociologists, or environmental scientists. This diversity of viewpoints not only enriches the evaluation process, but also helps to create more robust and adaptable solutions that account for both the benefits and the inherent risks of new ideas. Ultimately, pro-innovation bias is a double-edged sword. On one side, it is the very force that drives progress and fuels the development of groundbreaking technologies that can transform our lives for the better. On the other, if left unchecked, it can lead to the premature and uncritical adoption of innovations that might later prove problematic or even harmful. Recognizing and addressing this bias does not mean stifling creativity or halting progress. Rather, it involves adopting a more measured approach that values both the excitement of the new and the wisdom of cautious, evidence-based analysis. By striving to maintain a balanced perspective, we can harness the transformative power of innovation while ensuring that our enthusiasm is tempered by critical inquiry. In doing so, individuals, organizations, and policymakers can make better-informed decisions that not only drive progress but also safeguard against the pitfalls of unbridled optimism. Embracing new ideas with a healthy dose of skepticism ultimately leads to more sustainable advancements, ones that deliver genuine improvements while acknowledging and mitigating the risks inherent in the path of innovation. Hyperbolic discounting is a fascinating behavioral phenomenon where individuals disproportionately favor immediate rewards over larger, delayed benefits, even when the long-term gains are considerably greater. Instead of evaluating choices in a steady, linear fashion, our decision-making process tends to be warped by a steep decline in the perceived value of rewards as they move further into the future. This means that a reward available right now might seem far more appealing than one that is slightly delayed. even if waiting would result in a substantially better outcome. At its core, hyperbolic discounting challenges the traditional economic model that assumes people discount future rewards exponentially. Instead, the hyperbolic model suggests that our preferences change over time, leading to a higher discount rate in the near term that gradually diminishes as the delay increases. This results in a kind of present bias, where the immediate benefits are overvalued relative to future ones. For example, many people find it hard to save money when faced with the temptation to spend on something enjoyable today, even if saving would lead to greater financial security or a larger purchase in the future. This cognitive bias is not just a quirk of our economic decisions. It has far-reaching implications across various aspects of life. In health-related behaviors, hyperbolic discounting can be seen when individuals opt for short-term pleasures, like indulging in unhealthy foods or skipping exercise, instead of investing in long-term well-being. The immediate gratification of a sweet treat or a moment of relaxation often outweighs the abstract, distant benefit of improved health, leading to patterns that can contribute to chronic issues such as obesity or heart disease. Similarly, in academic or career pursuits, the allure of immediate leisure or comfort can undermine the pursuit of goals that require sustained effort and delayed rewards, like earning a degree or mastering a challenging skill. Psychologists suggest that hyperbolic discounting is deeply rooted in our evolutionary history. In environments where the future was uncertain and immediate survival was paramount, prioritizing immediate rewards would have been advantageous. While modern society has evolved to offer long-term stability and predictability, our brains still operate under many of these ancient heuristics. As a result, even when we consciously understand the benefits of planning for the future, our instinctive inclinations can lead us astray. This internal conflict often manifests as procrastination, impulsive behavior, or a reluctance to engage in long-term planning, despite knowing that such behaviors may have negative consequences later on. The impact of hyperbolic discounting extends beyond individual behavior and has significant societal implications. In the realm of public policy, for example, decisions about climate change, infrastructure investment, or education reform are all affected by how societies value immediate costs versus long-term benefits. Politicians and voters alike may favor policies that offer short-term improvements, even if these policies fail to address deeper, systemic issues that require sustained effort and resources. This dynamic can result in a cycle where short-term fixes are repeatedly chosen over strategic investments that could yield more substantial benefits over time. Researchers and policymakers have been actively exploring ways to mitigate the effects of hyperbolic discounting. One promising approach involves restructuring the decision-making environment to make long-term rewards more salient and immediate. For instance, commitment devices such as automatic savings plans or pre-commitment to healthy eating can help bridge the gap between our short-term impulses and our long-term goals. By reducing the friction between present actions and future benefits, these tools can nudge individuals toward choices that align more closely with their long-term interests. Another strategy is to reframe the way information is presented. Instead of focusing solely on the distant rewards, breaking them down into smaller, more tangible milestones can make future benefits feel more immediate. For example, a fitness program might highlight the incremental progress and immediate positive changes in mood and energy levels that come with regular exercise, rather than only emphasizing long-term weight loss or health improvements. This reframing can help counteract the steep discounting of future rewards, making the benefits of sustained effort more compelling in the present moment. Ultimately, understanding hyperbolic discounting is key to developing better strategies for personal decision-making and public policy. By recognizing that our natural tendency to favor immediate gratification can lead to choices that undermine long-term well-being, we can take steps to design environments, policies, and personal habits that help counteract this bias, whether it's through commitment devices, reframing future rewards, or simply increasing our awareness of our own impulsive tendencies. The goal is to create a balance between the allure of the present and the promise of the future. This balance is essential for achieving outcomes that are not only immediately satisfying, but also sustainable and beneficial over the long run. In the end, hyperbolic discounting is a reminder of the complex interplay between our evolutionary heritage and modern life. While our brains are wired to seek immediate rewards, the challenges and opportunities of the contemporary world demand that we think ahead and plan for tomorrow. By acknowledging and addressing this bias, we empower ourselves to make choices that better serve our long-term interests, paving the way for personal growth, improved well-being, and more thoughtful societal progress. The end of history illusion is a psychological phenomenon where people tend to believe that the significant changes in their personality, values, and beliefs have largely already occurred, and that their future selves will remain much like who they are today. Despite all the shifts and evolutions we experience over the years, many of us get the sense that we have reached a point of stability, underestimating the potential for further transformation. Imagine reflecting on your life and recalling the dramatic shifts of your youth, times of rapid learning, changing interests, and evolving attitudes. It's natural to feel that those early years, marked by such intense personal development, set the stage for who you are now. However, research shows that even though we recognize our past changes vividly, we consistently underestimate how much we will continue to change in the future. This bias leads us to believe that our core self has essentially been forged, leaving little room for the possibility of future evolution. This illusion can have a profound impact on how we plan our lives. When we assume that our values, preferences, and personality are fixed, we might be less inclined to invest in new experiences or embrace opportunities that could further shape our identity. For example, someone might decide against pursuing a new career path or a challenging hobby because they believe that their tastes and abilities are already set in stone. This narrow perspective can limit personal growth, as it discourages experimentation and the kind of continuous learning that is essential for adapting to life's inevitable changes. Psychologists suggest that the end of history illusion arises partly because our minds tend to compress distant past events, making them seem both more dramatic and more complete than they actually were. Over time, the intense feelings and rapid changes of earlier life stages recede into memory, and we view them as a finished chapter. In contrast, our present state feels immediate and immutable, giving us the false impression that our future will mirror our current identity. This tendency provides comfort, as it reinforces a stable sense of self in an unpredictable world. But it also blinds us to the dynamic nature of personal growth. Understanding this bias can encourage us to adopt a mindset of lifelong evolution, Instead of clinging to the belief that who we are today is who we will always be, we can recognize that personal development is a continuous process. This awareness can help us remain open to new experiences, challenges, and opportunities for change. For instance, by acknowledging that our perspectives and preferences are not fixed, we might be more willing to learn new skills, adapt to different social environments, or even reconsider long-held beliefs in light of new evidence. The implications of the end of history illusion extend beyond individual self-perception. They influence decisions in areas like career planning, relationships, and even public policy. When people assume that their personal traits are set, they may make long-term decisions based on a snapshot of their current selves. This can lead to choices that fail to account for the inevitable shifts in interests and capabilities that occur over time. In a broader sense, this bias can contribute to a static view of human potential, where growth and change are seen as exceptions rather than the norm. Overcoming the end of history illusion involves cultivating a mindset that embraces the fluidity of identity. One practical approach is to routinely engage in self-reflection and to challenge the assumption that we have arrived at our final self. By actively seeking out new experiences and being open to change, we can better prepare ourselves for the surprises that the future may hold. This attitude not only promotes personal development, but also fosters resilience, as it equips us to handle unexpected challenges and transitions with greater ease. Moreover, recognizing the end of history illusion can enhance our empathy toward others. Just as we underestimate our own capacity for change, we might also misjudge how others will evolve over time. Accepting that change is a constant part of life can lead us to be more supportive of others' growth and more flexible in our expectations of them. In doing so, we create an environment that values progress and adaptation, both on a personal and a community level. In conclusion, the end of history illusion reminds us that our sense of a fixed, stable self is an illusion, a comforting but ultimately misleading narrative. While it may feel reassuring to believe that we have become who we are meant to be, the reality is that personal evolution is an ongoing journey. By challenging our assumptions and remaining open to the continuous possibility of change, we not only enrich our own lives, but also contribute to a culture that values growth, adaptability, and lifelong learning. Embracing this perspective encourages us to look to the future, not as a mirror of our past, but as a canvas full of potential waiting to be explored. The IKEA Effect is a cognitive bias that leads people to place disproportionately high value on items they have assembled or created themselves, even if the final product is far from perfect. This phenomenon is named after the Swedish furniture company IKEA, where customers often build their own furniture, and despite the occasional imperfections or assembly challenges, they tend to overvalue the end result simply because they contributed effort and time to its creation. At its core, the IKEA Effect illustrates how personal investment can significantly alter our perception of value. When you put your own labor into building something, whether it's assembling a bookshelf, crafting a DIY project, or even developing a business strategy, you form an emotional attachment that goes beyond the object's objective quality. This emotional investment acts as a kind of self-justification. The more effort you expend, the more inclined you are to believe that what you've built must be of high quality. This self-enhancement helps resolve any internal conflict between the effort you've put in and the value you expect to receive. leading you to inflate your assessment of the item's worth. Research in behavioral economics and psychology has provided robust evidence for the IKEA effect. In controlled studies, participants were asked to assemble simple items like origami figures or model kits, and were later given the opportunity to assign a monetary value to their creations. Consistently, those who engaged in the assembly process placed a higher value on the items than similar products that were pre-assembled. This overvaluation isn't necessarily about the actual utility of the product. It's about the perceived worth that comes from personal involvement. The very act of building the item creates a bond, making the end product a symbol of one's own capabilities and efforts. This bias is not limited to physical objects. The principles underlying the IKEA effect can extend to other areas, such as ideas, projects, or even relationships. For example, an entrepreneur might overvalue a business plan or a product concept that they have developed themselves, dismissing external advice or alternative solutions that might actually be more effective. Similarly, in collaborative creative projects, team members might cling to their own contributions, even when a more objective external critique suggests that a different approach would yield better results. In both cases, the personal investment of time and energy makes it difficult to evaluate one's work without bias. The implications of the IKEA effect are broad and significant. On one hand, this bias can have positive outcomes by fostering a sense of pride, ownership, and motivation. When individuals see tangible results from their own efforts, they are more likely to persist in challenging tasks, build confidence, and develop skills that contribute to personal growth. This can be particularly valuable in educational settings or workplaces that encourage innovation and self-directed projects. On the other hand, the IKEA effect can also lead to less optimal decision-making. In business, for example, overvaluing internally developed ideas may result in a reluctance to adopt external solutions, even when those solutions have been proven effective. This over-attachment can contribute to inefficiencies, as organizations may end up spending more time and resources on projects that they have an emotional stake in, rather than objectively assessing the best available option. Similarly, on a personal level, individuals might stick with subpar solutions simply because they've invested so much effort into them, rather than considering that a different approach might serve them better. Recognizing the IKEA effect can be a powerful tool for achieving more balanced judgments. By understanding that our emotional investment can cloud our assessment of value, we can take steps to mitigate this bias. One strategy is to deliberately seek objective feedback from others who are not as emotionally involved in the project. This external perspective can help highlight areas where the product or idea may be lacking, allowing for improvements that might otherwise be overlooked. Additionally, developing a habit of critical self-reflection, questioning whether our attachment is based on objective quality or simply our own effort, can foster a more realistic evaluation of our work. In practical terms, being aware of the IKEA effect can lead to better outcomes in both personal and professional contexts. For instance, when making decisions about purchases, projects, or investments, taking a step back to evaluate whether our enthusiasm is based on genuine quality or just personal involvement can prevent us from overcommitting resources to something that may not deliver as expected. It also encourages an openness to external ideas and solutions, promoting a culture of collaboration and continuous improvement. Ultimately, the IKEA effect serves as a reminder that while personal effort and creativity are invaluable, they can sometimes skew our perception of value. Balancing self-pride with objective analysis enables us to celebrate our hard work without falling into the trap of overvaluation. Embracing this insight not only improves our decision-making processes, but also helps cultivate a mindset that values both innovation and critical reflection, a combination that is essential for growth and success in an ever-evolving world. The rhyme as reason effect is a fascinating cognitive bias in which people tend to perceive statements that rhyme as more credible, true, or valid than those that do not, even when the actual content is identical. When a message is couched in a pleasing, rhythmic pattern, it triggers a sense of cognitive fluency. That is, our brains process the information more smoothly, and this ease is often mistakenly equated with truth. The rhyme creates a kind of mental shortcut, allowing us to remember the statement more easily, which can, in turn, lead us to accept it without scrutinizing the underlying facts. This phenomenon is not merely a quirk of language, but is deeply rooted in how we process information. When we encounter a rhyming phrase, the repetition of sound patterns provides a sense of closure and coherence. That harmonious quality leads us to feel that the statement is complete and well considered. Our minds, always eager to simplify complex judgments, then lean on that superficial cue as an indicator of reliability. In everyday life, this means that a catchy slogan or a memorable proverb might be taken at face value simply because its sound structure makes it easier to process and recall. Research in cognitive psychology has supported the existence of the rhyme as reason effect. In various experiments, participants were presented with pairs of statements that conveyed the same information, one phrased in a rhyming format and the other in plain prose. The results consistently showed that the rhyming versions were rated as more likely to be true or more persuasive. This outcome suggests that our evaluative judgments are not based solely on logical analysis. Instead, they are influenced by the aesthetic qualities of the language. The brain's preference for patterned, rhythmic information can make a well-crafted rhyme seem more authoritative, even if the substance of the claim remains unchanged. The implications of this bias are significant, especially in areas like advertising, political communication, and public discourse. Marketers, for instance, have long exploited this effect by developing catchy jingles and slogans that stick in consumers' minds. Similarly, political figures may use rhyming phrases to make their messages more memorable and persuasive. While these strategies can be effective, they also raise important questions about how easily our judgments can be swayed by stylistic elements rather than by rigorous evidence or logical reasoning. The rhyme as reason effect thus serves as a reminder that the way information is presented can have a profound impact on our perceptions of its truthfulness. Understanding this bias offers practical benefits as well. Recognizing that a catchy, rhyming phrase is not necessarily a marker of a sound argument encourages us to slow down and critically evaluate the content rather than being seduced by the aesthetic appeal. For example, when you hear a clever proverb or an advertising slogan, it might be useful to ask yourself, what evidence supports this claim? Is the message simply memorable because it rhymes, or is it backed by reliable data? By developing this habit of questioning, you can become a more discerning consumer of information and resist the temptation to accept ideas at face value simply because they sound good. The broader lesson of the rhyme as reason effect is that our brains are not purely rational machines. they are also deeply influenced by the aesthetics of communication. The appeal of a rhyme lies not in its logical content, but in its capacity to reduce cognitive load. When information is easy to process, it creates a feeling of familiarity and comfort, which our minds often interpret as an endorsement of its truth. This is an adaptive shortcut that, in many cases, helps us make quick decisions. However, in contexts where precision and accuracy are critical, this shortcut can lead to overconfidence in ideas that are, at best, superficially attractive. In educational and professional settings, awareness of the rhyme as reason effect can lead to better communication strategies and improved critical thinking. Educators can encourage students to look beyond the surface features of language and focus on the underlying arguments and evidence. Likewise, professionals in fields that rely on persuasion, such as law, journalism, and public policy, can benefit from crafting their messages in a way that balances aesthetic appeal with substantive content. By doing so, they can engage their audiences without inadvertently promoting a bias towards style over substance. Ultimately, the rhyme as reason effect highlights an important aspect of human cognition. Our judgments are often influenced by factors that are, on the surface, unrelated to the actual merit of the information. The beauty of a well-crafted rhyme can mask a lack of empirical support, leading us to assign undue credibility to statements that simply sound good. By being aware of this bias, we can strive to base our beliefs and decisions on critical analysis rather than on the allure of linguistic elegance. Embracing a more reflective approach to how we process and evaluate information can help us navigate a world full of persuasive messages, ensuring that our conclusions are drawn from reasoned argument and evidence, rather than from the seductive power of a catchy rhyme. The Abilene Paradox is a striking phenomenon in group decision-making, where a group of people collectively agree on a course of action that, in truth, none of them individually support. This counterintuitive outcome arises because each member mistakenly believes that their own reservations or dissenting opinions are in the minority. Instead of voicing disagreement, everyone goes along with what they perceive as the consensus, leading to a decision that no one actually endorses. The term was popularized by management consultant Jerry B. Harvey, who illustrated the concept with a story about a family trip to Abilene, Texas. In that tale, each family member secretly harbored doubts about taking the long, hot drive, but assuming everyone else was enthusiastic, they all agreed to the journey, only to later realize that their decision was based on a false sense of agreement. At its heart, the Abilene Paradox exposes how the desire to maintain group harmony can override individual judgment. Members often suppress their own honest opinions because they fear that dissent might disrupt the unity of the group or lead to conflict. This social pressure creates an environment where silence is misinterpreted as assent, and the apparent unanimity reinforces the misconception that the decision is universally supported. Over time, this dynamic can cause groups to pursue actions that are not only unappealing to the individual members, but potentially detrimental to the group's overall well-being. The paradox reveals that the problem is not a lack of good ideas or rational thinking. Rather, it is a failure of communication and an inability to express true preferences. The implications of the Abilene Paradox are far-reaching, extending well beyond business meetings or family outings. In organizational settings, for example, teams may adopt strategies or launch projects that, while seemingly agreed upon by all, actually suffer from a lack of genuine buy-in. Employees might hesitate to raise concerns or propose alternatives, leading to decisions that are later critiqued for being out of touch with the group's real priorities. This phenomenon can result in wasted resources, missed opportunities for innovation, and even a decline in morale once the discrepancy between individual preferences and collective actions becomes evident. It also poses a risk for leaders who might misinterpret quiet agreement as enthusiastic support, thereby reinforcing a culture where true opinions are stifled. Moreover, the Abilene Paradox is not confined solely to professional or formal settings. It can influence personal relationships and community decisions as well. Consider a scenario in which a group of friends chooses a restaurant for dinner that none of them actually prefer, simply because each one is reluctant to suggest a different option. Later, they might find themselves dining in a place that leaves everyone dissatisfied, all the while believing that the decision was a unanimous one. Such situations highlight how the paradox can lead to outcomes that, though well-intentioned, ultimately fail to reflect the actual desires of those involved. In broader contexts, this misalignment between perceived and genuine consensus can hinder progress and even erode trust among group members. To counteract the effects of the Abilene Paradox, it is essential to cultivate an environment where open communication and honest expression are not only encouraged, but actively facilitated. One effective strategy is to create safe spaces for dissent, where group members feel comfortable sharing their true opinions without fear of retribution or judgment. Techniques such as anonymous surveys or structured round-robin discussions can help uncover hidden reservations and foster a more accurate understanding of the group's collective views. Leaders play a pivotal role in this process by explicitly inviting differing perspectives and demonstrating that disagreement is a natural and valuable part of decision-making. By actively seeking out and valuing diverse viewpoints, groups can prevent the formation of a false consensus and ensure that decisions truly reflect the collective will. Another approach involves framing the decision-making process in a way that emphasizes individual accountability. When each member is encouraged to articulate their own views independently, the risk of conforming to a perceived group norm diminishes. This method not only enhances the quality of the decisions, but also builds trust among team members by affirming that their personal opinions are important and respected. Over time, these practices can lead to a more robust decision-making process, where the final outcomes are the product of genuine dialogue rather than silent acquiescence. By acknowledging the potential for the Abilene Paradox, groups can take proactive steps to ensure that every voice is heard and that the decisions made are truly representative of the collective. Reflecting on the Abilene Paradox offers valuable insights into the complexities of human behavior and group dynamics. It serves as a reminder that the quest for harmony should never come at the expense of authenticity. Instead of equating silence with agreement, it is crucial for individuals and organizations alike to recognize that dissent can be a constructive force, driving better decisions and fostering a culture of transparency. Whether in boardrooms, among friends, or within communities, acknowledging the inherent risks of false consensus is the first step toward more effective and honest collaboration. In summary, the Abilene Paradox illustrates how group decisions can sometimes be the product of collective misperception rather than genuine agreement. It underscores the importance of clear, open communication and the willingness to embrace dissent as a pathway to better outcomes. By fostering an environment that values individual input and challenges assumptions of unanimity, groups can avoid the pitfalls of the paradox, leading to decisions that truly reflect the interests and preferences of all involved. Ultimately, recognizing and addressing the Abilene Paradox not only improves the quality of decisions, but also strengthens the bonds of trust and cooperation within any group. The false uniqueness effect is a cognitive bias in which people tend to underestimate how common their positive traits, skills, or accomplishments are among others. This bias leads us to view our own good qualities as more exceptional or rare than they really are, and it can have far-reaching implications in how we see ourselves and interact with the world. At its core, the false uniqueness effect occurs because we have a natural tendency to focus on our own strengths while overlooking the similar strengths in others. For example, if you consider yourself a good driver, a kind friend, or a creative thinker, you might assume that these qualities are scarce. In reality, many people share these positive traits. Yet, because we spend a lot of time reflecting on and valuing our own abilities, we develop the belief that we are uniquely special in these respects. This skewed perception reinforces our self-esteem and can even lead us to assume that our perspectives, talents, and achievements are more extraordinary than they actually are. This bias can be partly attributed to the way we process information about ourselves versus others. We naturally pay more attention to our personal successes and positive feedback because these aspects are closely tied to our identity. Meanwhile, we are less attuned to the similar accomplishments or admirable qualities that others possess. As a result, when we compare ourselves to an abstract, average person, we tend to think that we stand out in a favorable light. This self-enhancing mechanism not only boosts our confidence but also makes it harder for us to appreciate that our qualities might be more common than we believe. The false uniqueness effect manifests in various areas of life. In social settings, it might lead someone to feel that their hobbies, tastes, or opinions are truly unique, thereby fostering a sense of individual distinctiveness. While this can be a source of personal pride, it may also create barriers to empathy and understanding. When we view our own experiences as exceptionally rare, we might struggle to relate to others or fail to recognize the shared commonalities that bind us. In the workplace, for instance, a professional who overestimates the uniqueness of their ideas might be less open to collaboration, mistakenly believing that their approach is far superior to those of their colleagues, even when similar ideas are being considered elsewhere. Psychologists have conducted research to uncover the roots of this bias. Studies have found that individuals often rate their own positive attributes as being less common among the general population than they actually are. This tendency is not necessarily rooted in narcissism or arrogance. Rather, it appears to be a natural outcome of how we focus on and internalize our personal achievements. By selectively recalling our best moments and personal virtues, we inadvertently construct an image of ourselves that seems remarkably distinct from the average person. This cognitive distortion, while it can enhance self-esteem, also distorts our understanding of social reality. The implications of the false uniqueness effect extend beyond mere self-perception. It can affect decision-making and interpersonal relationships in subtle ways. For instance, In negotiations or group decision-making scenarios, individuals might overestimate the distinctiveness of their contributions. Believing that their insights are uniquely valuable, they might be less inclined to seek input from others or to consider alternative viewpoints. Over time, this can lead to overconfidence and a lack of openness, ultimately hindering effective collaboration and innovation. Moreover, the false uniqueness effect can play a role in the way we respond to criticism or feedback. When we strongly believe that our positive traits are unique, we might dismiss criticism as unfounded or irrelevant because it conflicts with our self-image. This defensive posture can prevent us from learning from our mistakes and from growing both personally and professionally. Acknowledging that our strengths are shared by many can be a humbling experience, one that fosters a greater sense of community and mutual understanding. It encourages us to view success as something that can be cultivated and shared, rather than as an exclusive trait that sets us apart from everyone else. Recognizing and mitigating the false uniqueness effect involves a conscious effort to appreciate the common humanity in ourselves and others. One approach is to actively seek feedback from peers and mentors, which can provide a more balanced view of our strengths and areas for improvement. Engaging in reflective practices, such as journaling or mindfulness, can also help us observe our tendencies without immediately jumping to self-enhancement. By stepping back and considering how others might share similar experiences and talents, we can cultivate a more realistic and connected sense of self. In practical terms, this shift in perspective can have numerous benefits. When we see that our positive attributes are not as rare as we once believed, we may become more open to collaboration and less prone to isolation. This can lead to richer social interactions and more effective teamwork, as we recognize that the success of a group often stems from the collective strengths of its members. Additionally, understanding that many people share our positive traits can foster humility, reduce feelings of superiority, and encourage a more compassionate approach to both ourselves and others. Ultimately, the false uniqueness effect serves as a reminder that while it's natural to cherish our personal achievements, we should also be mindful of the broader context in which they exist. Embracing the reality that many others possess similar strengths does not diminish our individuality. Rather, it enriches our perspective by highlighting the common threads that unite us all. In doing so, we open ourselves up to a deeper sense of connection, learning, and growth, a reminder that our accomplishments, though meaningful, are part of a shared human experience. The illusory truth effect is a cognitive bias where repeated exposure to a statement increases the likelihood that it will be judged as true, regardless of its actual veracity. When we encounter a piece of information over and over again, it becomes more familiar to us, and that familiarity often gets mistaken for truth. This phenomenon operates on the principle of processing fluency. Our brains are inclined to accept information that is easier to process. When something is repeated, it requires less cognitive effort to comprehend, and that ease of processing creates a false sense of certainty. At the heart of the illusory truth effect is our natural tendency to rely on heuristics, or mental shortcuts, in order to make quick decisions. In a world overflowing with data, our cognitive resources are limited, so we often use familiarity as a proxy for reliability. If we hear a statement repeatedly, our brain doesn't have to work hard to retrieve details or verify facts. so it defaults to assuming that the repeated message must be correct. This shortcut can be particularly dangerous in contexts where the initial information is questionable or even false. Research has consistently demonstrated this bias. In controlled experiments, participants were presented with a series of statements, some true and some false, multiple times. Over time, even if a statement started out as unbelievable, repeated exposure made it seem more credible. One classic study showed that when participants encountered a mix of plausible and implausible statements several times, they later rated the statements they had heard more often as more likely to be true than those heard only once. This effect illustrates that repetition can override critical thinking, leading to a widespread acceptance of information based purely on its frequency. The illusory truth effect has profound implications in various domains, particularly in media and politics. Advertisers, for instance, often repeat slogans or key messages to embed their ideas into the public consciousness. Similarly, in political discourse, sound bites and repeated talking points can gain traction even if the underlying facts are debatable. Social media further amplifies this phenomenon. Algorithms that prioritize frequently shared content contribute to echo chambers, where the same information circulates repeatedly, reinforcing beliefs and making misinformation appear more credible. This environment creates fertile ground for the spread of rumors and fake news. Beyond the realm of public communication, the illusory truth effect influences everyday decision-making. In our personal lives, repeated exposure to certain ideas, be they about health, finance, or relationships, can lead us to accept them without sufficient scrutiny. For example, a repeated assertion about the benefits or dangers of a particular diet or product can shape consumer behavior, regardless of the scientific evidence supporting it. This cognitive bias can lead to choices that are not based on objective facts, but on the comfort of familiarity. Overcoming the illusory truth effect requires a conscious effort to engage in critical thinking and seek out independent verification of repeated claims. One effective strategy is to deliberately question the source and context of information, especially when it is presented repeatedly. Fact-checking and consulting multiple sources can help counteract the seductive allure of repetition. Educators and communicators can play a crucial role by fostering environments where skepticism and inquiry are valued over rote acceptance. Encouraging people to look beyond the surface of repeated messages and to ask, "Why do I believe this?" can help mitigate the impact of this bias. The implications of the illusory truth effect are significant in an era dominated by digital media and rapid information dissemination. With the constant barrage of repeated messages online, individuals are more susceptible than ever to accepting false or misleading information as fact. Recognizing this bias is the first step in building a more informed and discerning public. By being aware of how repetition influences our perceptions of truth, we can better navigate the complex information landscape and make decisions based on evidence rather than familiarity alone. Ultimately, the illusory truth effect is a powerful reminder that our cognitive shortcuts, while useful in reducing mental effort, can sometimes lead us astray. In a world where repetition is a common tactic to shape opinions and behaviors, developing a habit of critical inquiry and verification is essential. Embracing this mindset not only safeguards our individual decision-making processes, but also contributes to a more thoughtful and resilient society. Through continuous learning and a willingness to challenge repeated narratives, we can strive for a clearer understanding of the truth amidst the noise of constant information repetition. The clustering illusion is a cognitive bias that leads us to perceive meaningful patterns or clusters in random data or events, even when none exist. Our brains are wired to search for order in chaos, a survival mechanism that helped our ancestors quickly identify threats or opportunities in their environment. This same instinct, however, can mislead us in modern contexts, where randomness is more common than we might think. When we encounter random events, such as coin tosses, lottery numbers, or even patterns in social behavior, we often see clusters and trends that are purely coincidental. This tendency to find order can result in overinterpretation of chance occurrences, influencing our beliefs and decisions in subtle yet significant ways. Imagine watching a sequence of coin flips. Even though each flip is independent and has an equal chance of being heads or tails, you might notice what seems to be a streak of heads or a sudden cluster of tails, and assume that the coin is biased. In reality, these streaks are normal in random sequences and do not indicate any underlying pattern. This is just one example of how the clustering illusion manifests in everyday life. In the realm of gambling, for instance, people might believe that a slot machine is hot or cold based on recent outcomes, even though each play is independent. The illusion convinces us that patterns exist where only randomness reigns. The appeal of the clustering illusion lies in the way our minds work. We are naturally predisposed to seek patterns because doing so has historically aided in survival. Recognizing a pattern can alert us to potential dangers or opportunities, like the sudden rustle in the bushes that might signal the approach of a predator. However, this same pattern-seeking behavior can lead us astray when the data is random. In statistical terms, random processes often produce clusters that appear significant, even though they are expected outcomes of chance. This misunderstanding can lead people to make faulty judgments, believing that what they see is evidence of a trend or a causal relationship. The impact of the clustering illusion extends beyond simple misinterpretations in games of chance. In financial markets, for example, investors may see patterns in stock price fluctuations and mistakenly infer trends that justify risky decisions. This bias can contribute to market bubbles or crashes when collective misinterpretation of random fluctuations drives irrational behavior. Similarly, in medicine, a doctor might notice a cluster of symptoms in a patient and overestimate the likelihood of a rare disease, potentially leading to misdiagnosis. Even in everyday life, the clustering illusion can affect our social interactions. We might perceive coincidences as significant when, in fact, they are merely random occurrences that hold no deeper meaning. Understanding the clustering illusion is critical because it reminds us to be cautious about over-interpreting coincidences. One way to counteract this bias is by relying on statistical reasoning and acknowledging the role of randomness in observed data. By learning about probability and the law of large numbers, we can better appreciate that clusters are often an expected feature of random events. This awareness is particularly important in an era when vast amounts of data are readily available and patterns are constantly sought out and publicized. Without a critical approach, we might fall prey to the temptation of seeing meaningful connections where there are none. Moreover, the clustering illusion has important implications for how we perceive social phenomena. In our personal lives, We might notice that a few of our friends share a specific habit or interest and assume that this trait is unique to our group, when in fact, it might be much more common. This can foster a false sense of exclusivity or uniqueness that shapes our self-perception and social identity. In broader societal contexts, media reports might highlight clusters of rare events, like isolated incidents of crime or disease outbreaks, leading to exaggerated perceptions of risk. The clustering illusion, therefore, not only skews our understanding of randomness, but also influences our emotions and behavior, sometimes in ways that are not justified by the underlying facts. Recognizing the clustering illusion involves cultivating a mindset that values skepticism and statistical literacy. When we encounter a pattern, asking whether it could simply be a product of random chance is a useful habit. This means taking a step back and considering alternative explanations rather than immediately jumping to conclusions. In scientific research, for example, rigorous experimental design and statistical analysis are employed precisely to distinguish real patterns from those that occur by chance. By adopting similar strategies in everyday decision-making, we can mitigate the influence of this bias and make more informed judgments. Ultimately, the clustering illusion serves as a powerful reminder of the limitations of our cognitive processes. While our instinct to find patterns is an essential part of human cognition, it is not infallible. By understanding that random events can and do produce clusters that might look meaningful, we become better equipped to separate genuine trends from mere coincidences. This awareness not only helps in making better decisions in areas like finance, medicine, or public policy, but also encourages a more balanced view of the world around us. Recognizing the role of randomness in our lives can lead to greater humility and caution in our interpretations, ultimately fostering a more realistic and evidence-based perspective on the myriad events we experience every day. Normalcy bias is a cognitive tendency that makes it difficult for people to envision or accept that a radically new or catastrophic event might occur because they are so accustomed to the current state of affairs. This bias creates a false sense of security where we assume that future events will unfold just as they always have, even when warning signs suggest otherwise. In our daily lives, this bias can manifest in many ways, from underestimating the potential for natural disasters to dismissing the likelihood of economic collapse or even personal misfortune. Because we are so immersed in our routine environments, it becomes challenging to imagine that these patterns could suddenly be disrupted by an unforeseen catastrophe. The roots of normalcy bias lie in our need for stability and predictability. Human beings are wired to seek comfort in familiarity, and this preference helps us to function efficiently in a world that is otherwise complex and unpredictable. By assuming that the future will resemble the past, our minds conserve energy and reduce anxiety. However, this same mechanism can be dangerous when it prevents us from preparing for events that, although rare, can have devastating consequences. When confronted with early signs of disaster, such as unusual weather patterns, escalating conflicts, or economic downturns, the normalcy bias can cause us to dismiss these indicators as temporary anomalies rather than potential harbingers of major change. A common example of normalcy bias can be seen in the way people respond to natural disasters like hurricanes or earthquakes. Despite scientific forecasts and historical data that indicate a high risk, many individuals choose to stay in their homes convinced that the severity of the event will be less than predicted. This inaction often results from a belief that things will remain as they have always been, making it difficult for people to take the necessary precautions. Similarly, in the face of public health crises, individuals might downplay early warnings and resist recommended safety measures, assuming that the situation will soon revert to normal. Such responses can have serious consequences, leaving people unprepared for rapid and dramatic shifts in their environment. The implications of normalcy bias extend beyond personal safety. They also affect societal decision-making and policy responses. When leaders and institutions fall prey to this bias, they may delay implementing crucial measures to mitigate risks. This delay can exacerbate the impact of crises, as seen in various instances of environmental, economic, or security-related challenges. In many cases, the initial reluctance to act is rooted in the belief that the current state of affairs is not about to change, leading to missed opportunities for early intervention. The cost of such inaction can be immense, affecting not only individual lives, but entire communities and economies. Research in psychology and behavioral economics has shed light on the mechanisms behind normalcy bias. Studies have shown that individuals tend to rely on mental shortcuts that favor familiarity, often at the expense of recognizing potential threats. These cognitive shortcuts are reinforced over time, making it increasingly difficult to shift perspectives, even when compelling evidence suggests that a dramatic change is imminent. In controlled experiments, participants exposed to hypothetical disaster scenarios often underestimated both the likelihood and the potential severity of the events, illustrating how deeply ingrained the bias can be. This tendency is not a sign of irrationality. Rather, it is a natural outcome of the way our brains have evolved to manage information and reduce stress. Overcoming normalcy bias requires a conscious effort to challenge our default assumptions about the future. One effective approach is to actively seek out information that contradicts our expectations and to consider alternative scenarios. For example, engaging with experts and examining historical precedents for dramatic change can help to counteract the tendency to assume that it will all be fine. Developing contingency plans and rehearsing responses to potential crises are practical steps that can reduce the shock of sudden change and improve our ability to react appropriately when events unfold differently than expected. By cultivating a mindset that is open to the possibility of disruption, we can better prepare for and mitigate the effects of catastrophic events. Another important aspect of addressing normalcy bias is fostering a culture of proactive planning and open communication. In both organizations and communities, creating systems that encourage regular risk assessment and contingency planning can help to break the cycle of complacency. Educational programs that highlight the realities of change and uncertainty can also be instrumental in reshaping our perceptions. By understanding that the world is inherently unpredictable, individuals and groups can learn to balance the comfort of routine with the need for preparedness. This shift in perspective not only enhances our resilience, but also empowers us to take decisive action in the face of uncertainty. In everyday life, recognizing normalcy bias can lead to better personal decision-making, whether it involves preparing for severe weather, saving for economic downturns, or simply being more aware of the signs that things are not as they seam. A willingness to acknowledge potential risks can be a powerful tool. It encourages us to question our assumptions and to adopt a more nuanced view of reality, one that accepts that change, especially sudden and significant change, is always a possibility. Embracing this mindset does not mean living in constant fear, but rather, it allows us to navigate a complex world with a balanced perspective that values both stability and adaptability. The illusion of control is a cognitive bias where individuals overestimate their ability to influence events that are largely governed by chance or external factors. This phenomenon can be observed in many everyday situations, from gambling and sports to workplace decisions and even health-related behaviors. People often feel that by their own actions, they can steer outcomes in their favor, even when the situation is inherently random or outside their true influence. This bias was first systematically studied by psychologist Ellen Langer, who demonstrated that when people believe they have control over a situation, their confidence increases, even if there is no real impact on the outcome. For instance, in gambling, many players might choose their own numbers for a lottery ticket, or believe that a particular ritual can bring them luck. They might even throw dice in a specific way, thinking that these actions can change the odds, when in reality, the outcomes remain entirely random. This overestimation of control can lead to persistent behaviors, even when evidence suggests that their actions have no real effect. In our daily lives, the illusion of control can serve as both a psychological comfort and a source of potential risk. On one hand, believing that we can influence events can be empowering. It fosters a sense of agency and optimism, encouraging us to take actions that might actually lead to positive changes. For example, when someone adheres to a strict exercise regimen or follows a healthy diet, they might attribute their improved well-being solely to their efforts, sometimes neglecting the influence of genetic factors or environmental circumstances. In this way, the illusion of control can bolster motivation and persistence. On the other hand, this bias can lead to overconfidence, resulting in poor decision-making. In financial markets, investors might overestimate their ability to predict trends and time the market, often leading to risky trades that are based more on their perceived influence than on solid analysis. Similarly, in business settings, leaders might rely too heavily on their own judgment when the outcomes are shaped by unpredictable external forces, such as economic fluctuations or shifts in consumer behavior. This misplaced confidence can result in decisions that expose organizations to significant risks, underestimating the role of chance and external factors. One key aspect of the illusion of control is the human tendency to seek patterns and causality in the world. Our brains are wired to make sense of complex environments by creating narratives that link actions to outcomes. This is particularly evident in competitive or high-stakes situations. For example, athletes might develop superstitions or elaborate routines, believing that their actions before a game directly affect their performance. Coaches and fans, too, may latch on to specific strategies or signals, convinced that they hold the key to success. Even when statistical analysis shows that these factors have minimal impact, the subjective experience of control reinforces the belief that, if I do this, I can change the outcome. The impact of the illusion of control extends beyond individual decision-making. It also shapes social interactions and collective behaviors. In group settings, members might collectively overestimate their ability to influence events, leading to consensus decisions that are overly optimistic or dismissive of external risks. This can be seen in scenarios ranging from business ventures to political campaigns, where groups may ignore warning signs or downplay potential challenges, convinced that their combined effort can overcome any obstacle. Such collective overconfidence can have far-reaching consequences, sometimes resulting in significant miscalculations or failures that could have been mitigated with a more realistic assessment of control. Psychologically, the illusion of control can be partly explained by the desire to reduce uncertainty. In a world filled with unpredictability, believing that one has some influence, even if it is illusory, provides a comforting sense of order and stability. It allows individuals to feel less at the mercy of random events, which in turn reduces anxiety and promotes a proactive mindset. However, this comfort comes at a cost if it prevents people from accurately assessing risks or acknowledging the limits of their influence. Over time, this can lead to a cycle of repeated errors and misplaced confidence, where each success reinforces the bias, while failures are either attributed to bad luck or minimized in importance. Overcoming the illusion of control requires a conscious effort to recognize and critically evaluate the factors that truly determine outcomes. One strategy is to rely on data and statistical reasoning, which can offer a more objective view of probability and chance. For instance, in financial investing, adopting a disciplined, evidence-based approach rather than relying solely on intuition can help mitigate the risks associated with overconfidence. Similarly, in personal decision-making, reflecting on past outcomes and seeking external feedback can provide a more balanced perspective on the extent of one's influence. Another important aspect is developing a mindset that embraces uncertainty as a natural part of life. Instead of striving for complete control, it can be more adaptive to acknowledge the limits of one's influence and to prepare for a range of possible outcomes. This approach not only reduces the likelihood of overestimating one's control, but also encourages resilience as individuals become better equipped to adjust their strategies in the face of unexpected challenges. Educational programs and training sessions that focus on critical thinking and decision-making can help individuals identify and counteract the bias, fostering a more realistic understanding of control in complex systems. The illusion of control also has cultural and societal implications. In cultures that emphasize individual agency and self-reliance, the bias may be more pronounced, as people are socialized to believe that hard work and determination invariably lead to success. While this can drive innovation and progress, it may also obscure the role of external factors and systemic influences in shaping outcomes. Recognizing this broader context is essential for creating policies and systems that acknowledge both individual effort and the inherent uncertainties of life. Reactive devaluation is a cognitive bias where proposals, ideas, or suggestions are automatically devalued simply because they originate from an adversary or an external source, rather than being evaluated on their intrinsic merits. This tendency can affect both interpersonal and group dynamics, where even well-intentioned offers from opponents or outsiders are instinctively met with suspicion or outright dismissal. When people hold strong preconceptions or are emotionally invested in a particular stance, they are more likely to view suggestions coming from those who disagree with them as less valuable. The bias operates on a fundamental level. It is not about the content of the idea, but rather about its source. When an idea comes from someone perceived as an enemy or a rival, the psychological reaction is to reduce its value, often leading to missed opportunities for compromise or innovation. The roots of reactive devaluation can be traced to our evolutionary need to protect our in-group and to be wary of external influences that might threaten our survival or identity. This defense mechanism, while beneficial in certain contexts, becomes counterproductive in modern environments that require collaboration and open exchange of ideas. In negotiation settings, for instance, one party might automatically downplay a proposal from the other side simply because of the negative feelings or distrust that already exist between them. This reaction can impede productive dialogue, as parties become locked in positions that are reinforced not by the strength of their arguments, but by their bias against the source of the opposing view. The result is a stalemate where no progress is made, even if the proposals on the table would be mutually beneficial if properly considered. In everyday life, reactive devaluation can be observed in situations ranging from workplace disputes to international diplomacy. Within organizations, employees might dismiss suggestions from a rival department or an external consultant, regardless of the objective quality of those suggestions. The instinct to protect one's own perspective or territory often leads to a scenario where valuable insights are overlooked simply because they come from an outsider. Similarly, in politics, citizens and leaders alike may disregard policies proposed by an opposing party, not based on the policy's potential effectiveness, but on the animosity towards the group that advocates for them. This bias contributes to polarization and reduces the likelihood of finding common ground in contentious situations. The mechanism behind reactive devaluation is closely linked to the interplay between affective responses and cognitive evaluation. Emotional reactions to a source, whether it's a rival group, an opponent, or a controversial figure, can color the way information is processed. When a proposal is made by someone who is not part of one's trusted circle, the initial emotional response may be one of irritation or disbelief, which then biases the cognitive assessment process. As a result, even if the idea itself is sound and well supported by evidence, it is quickly and unconsciously discounted. This means that efforts to change minds or bridge divides can be undermined from the outset by the very perception of who is making the suggestion. Addressing reactive devaluation requires a deliberate shift in mindset and a commitment to evaluate ideas independently of their source. One effective strategy is to focus on the merits of the proposal itself rather than on who is proposing it. This can involve setting up structured evaluation processes, where ideas are anonymized or assessed by a neutral party, thereby reducing the influence of pre-existing biases. In organizational settings, fostering an environment where dissent is not only tolerated but valued can help mitigate the effects of reactive devaluation. When individuals feel that their contributions will be judged fairly, regardless of their affiliation, they are more likely to consider ideas on their merits and engage in constructive dialogue. Another important approach is to cultivate empathy and understanding between opposing sides, recognizing that every group or individual has their own perspectives, experiences, and reasons for holding certain views, can help lower the emotional barriers that fuel reactive devaluation. In negotiation or conflict resolution scenarios, efforts to build rapport and trust through shared experiences or transparent communication can make it easier to see the value in ideas coming from former adversaries. By acknowledging common goals and vulnerabilities, people can begin to appreciate that valuable insights are not the exclusive property of any one group, and that collaboration often leads to better outcomes than rigid opposition. In a broader societal context, overcoming reactive devaluation is essential for addressing issues that require collective action, such as climate change, public health, or social justice. When communities are divided by entrenched biases, even well-founded proposals can be dismissed simply because they are associated with an outgroup. Encouraging public discourse that emphasizes fact-based discussions and constructive engagement is vital for breaking down these barriers. Educational initiatives that promote critical thinking and emotional intelligence can also play a key role in helping individuals recognize and counteract their own biases. By learning to separate the content of an argument from the identity of the speaker, society as a whole can move toward more collaborative and effective problem solving. Recency bias is a cognitive tendency where recent events or information disproportionately influence our judgments and decisions compared to older, equally or more relevant data. This bias leads us to place greater importance on what we have just experienced, heard, or seen, while the details from the more distant past fade in significance. Because the most recent information is fresh in our minds, it tends to shape our perceptions of reality, sometimes causing us to overreact to short-term trends and neglect longer-term evidence. This phenomenon can be observed in many everyday contexts. In the world of finance, for example, investors might chase after a stock that has shown rapid gains recently, even though historical data indicates that the stock's overall performance has been volatile. Similarly, in the workplace, managers might base their evaluations on the latest project performance or the most recent feedback, disregarding a longer record of consistent, if less flashy, contributions. In our personal lives, we might judge a relationship or a friend based on a recent disagreement or an isolated incident, overlooking years of positive interactions that paint a fuller picture of the situation. At the heart of recency bias is the way our memory works. Recent events are stored in our short-term memory with greater clarity and emotional intensity, making them more accessible when we are called upon to recall information. This ease of retrieval gives the illusion that recent events are more important or typical than they truly are. Our brains are wired to respond to new and immediate stimuli, a trait that was once crucial for survival. In modern settings, however, this evolutionary trait can lead us to make decisions that are skewed by the weight of the latest information, rather than by a balanced consideration of all available evidence. Media and technology further reinforce recency bias. With news cycles that update constantly and social media feeds that highlight the newest posts and trends, we are continuously exposed to fresh information. This flood of current events can create a distorted view of reality where the most recent stories appear to be the most important, even if they are outliers rather than representative of broader trends. As a result, our opinions and decisions can be heavily influenced by the present moment, while historical context is pushed aside. The consequences of recency bias can be significant. In politics, for instance, voters might overvalue the latest campaign promises or recent political scandals, disregarding a candidate's long-term track record. This can lead to electoral decisions based on transient issues rather than a comprehensive evaluation of policies and character. In business, companies might make strategic decisions based on recent market fluctuations or consumer behavior, potentially ignoring important patterns that emerge only when viewed over a longer period. Even in our daily interactions, recency bias can affect how we perceive people and situations. sometimes leading us to form judgments that do not accurately reflect the full story. Mitigating recency bias involves cultivating a habit of looking at the bigger picture. One effective strategy is to deliberately incorporate historical data and long-term trends into our decision-making process. For example, investors can use analytical tools that smooth out short-term volatility to reveal underlying patterns, while managers can conduct comprehensive performance reviews that span several months or years, instead of focusing solely on the most recent events. On a personal level, taking time to reflect on past experiences and considering them alongside recent events can lead to more balanced judgments about relationships, personal achievements, or setbacks. Another approach is to slow down our decision-making process. When we pause to reflect and critically evaluate why recent events seem so prominent in our minds, we can begin to question whether we are giving them too much weight. This reflective practice can help us recognize when our judgments are being overly influenced by the immediacy of new information and allow us to adjust our perspective accordingly. In educational and professional settings, fostering a culture that values historical context and longitudinal analysis can also help individuals become more aware of their susceptibility to recency bias. In summary, recency bias is a common mental shortcut that, while often useful for making quick decisions, can lead to a skewed understanding of reality when recent information overshadows important historical context. By recognizing its influence and adopting strategies to counteract it, such as incorporating long-term data, slowing down our decision-making, and critically reflecting on our judgments, we can work toward more balanced and informed decisions. This balanced approach not only improves personal decision-making, but also enhances collective outcomes in fields ranging from finance and business to politics and everyday life, ensuring that our actions are based on a complete picture rather than just the most immediate impressions. Belief bias is a cognitive shortcut where individuals evaluate the strength of an argument primarily based on whether its conclusion aligns with their pre-existing beliefs, rather than on the actual logical merits of the argument itself. This tendency means that even if an argument is logically flawed, if its conclusion is consistent with what someone already believes, that person is likely to judge the argument as sound. Conversely, even a well-constructed argument might be dismissed or undervalued if its conclusion conflicts with deeply held views. This bias can significantly impact how we process information and make decisions, influencing everything from everyday conversations to high-stakes policy debates. At the heart of belief bias lies our natural inclination toward confirmation, our desire to see our beliefs validated and to avoid cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable feeling that arises when new information challenges our existing views. When we encounter an argument, our initial reaction is often to check whether the conclusion fits with our worldview. If it does, we're more inclined to accept the reasoning without scrutinizing the evidence or logical structure that supports it. This selective processing can lead us to overlook errors in reasoning or fallacious arguments simply because they confirm what we already think is true. Consider a scenario in which two people are debating a contentious issue like climate change policy. One person, who already believes that immediate, drastic action is necessary, might readily accept arguments advocating for aggressive measures, even if those arguments contain logical gaps or unsupported assumptions. On the other hand, A person skeptical about the need for such measures might reject those same arguments outright, not because the evidence is necessarily weak, but because the conclusion clashes with their established beliefs. In both cases, the actual quality of the argument is overshadowed by the emotional comfort provided by confirming pre-existing opinions. Research in cognitive psychology has demonstrated that belief bias can operate subtly yet powerfully. In controlled studies, participants were presented with syllogisms, logical arguments consisting of premises and a conclusion, that varied in both their logical validity and the believability of the conclusion. The findings consistently revealed that people were more likely to endorse conclusions that aligned with their beliefs, regardless of whether the logical structure of the argument was sound. This suggests that our evaluative process is not as objective as we might like to think. Instead, it is heavily tinted by our personal biases and the desire for consistency in our belief systems. The implications of belief bias extend well beyond academic exercises. In everyday life, this bias can hinder our ability to engage in constructive debates, as it makes us more resistant to ideas that challenge our assumptions. In the political arena, for instance, voters may dismiss policy proposals from opposing parties not on the basis of merit, but because the proposals conflict with their ideological preferences. This can contribute to political polarization, where groups become increasingly entrenched in their views, and compromise or mutual understanding becomes more difficult to achieve. Similarly, in the realm of science and medicine, belief bias can lead people to reject new findings or treatments if they contradict long-held beliefs, even when such findings are supported by robust evidence. One of the key challenges posed by belief bias is its self-reinforcing nature. When we favor arguments that confirm our views, we are less likely to seek out or consider alternative perspectives. This creates a feedback loop where our beliefs are continuously reinforced, potentially leading to an overconfidence in our own opinions. As a result, we may become less open to learning, less willing to adjust our views in the face of new evidence, and more likely to engage in echo chambers where dissenting opinions are actively filtered out. Over time, this can limit personal growth and hinder collective problem-solving efforts. Addressing belief bias requires conscious effort and strategies aimed at promoting critical thinking and open-mindedness. One effective approach is to actively seek out opposing viewpoints and to engage with them in a constructive manner. By deliberately exposing ourselves to ideas that challenge our beliefs, we can begin to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of different arguments more objectively. Educational systems and workplaces can play a pivotal role by encouraging debate and critical analysis, teaching individuals not only to understand various perspectives, but also to evaluate arguments based on evidence and logical coherence, rather than personal agreement. Another important strategy is to practice reflective thinking, taking the time to consider why we hold certain beliefs and whether our judgments about an argument are being influenced more by emotional comfort than by rational evaluation. Techniques such as mindfulness and journaling can help individuals become more aware of their cognitive processes and biases, making it easier to step back and assess arguments in a more balanced manner. Additionally, using structured decision-making tools that emphasize evidence and reasoning can help mitigate the influence of belief bias by forcing us to articulate the rationale behind our judgments. In contexts where decisions have significant consequences, such as in business, policymaking or scientific research, organizations can implement processes to counteract belief bias. For example, having diverse teams with a range of perspectives can reduce the risk that group decisions will be dominated by a single biased viewpoint. Moreover, anonymous evaluations of proposals or ideas can help ensure that they are judged on their merits rather than on the reputation or perceived alignment of the person presenting them. These practices not only improve the quality of decisions, but also promote a culture of critical inquiry and intellectual humility. Authority bias is a cognitive tendency in which people give undue weight and credibility to the opinions, statements, or decisions of those perceived to hold authority, often without sufficient scrutiny or independent evaluation. This bias can manifest in various aspects of life, from everyday interactions to major institutional decisions, as individuals naturally assume that someone in a position of power or expertise must have correct or superior knowledge. Even when the authority figure's claims are not backed by evidence, the mere fact of their position can lead others to accept their views almost uncritically. At the heart of authority, bias is a deep-seated trust in hierarchical structures. Throughout history, societies have relied on leaders, experts, and institutions to provide guidance, safety, and order. This long-standing tradition has shaped our cognitive processes, leading us to quickly defer to those who appear knowledgeable or powerful. For instance, when a doctor or scientist presents information about a medical treatment, people are likely to accept it as fact because of the perceived expertise associated with these roles. Similarly, in a corporate setting, employees may hesitate to question decisions made by senior management, even if those decisions seem flawed, because the authority of their leaders creates an aura of correctness. The psychological mechanisms behind authority bias are intertwined with our need for social order and efficiency. In complex environments, it is often impractical to verify every piece of information independently, so relying on trusted sources can save time and cognitive effort. This reliance is reinforced by social conditioning. From a young age, we are taught to respect our teachers, follow our parents' advice, and later, to trust experts in various fields. While this shortcut is adaptive in many situations, it can also lead to problems when authority figures misuse their influence, or when their knowledge is limited or biased. For example, in the realm of public policy, voters may support a proposal simply because it is endorsed by a popular politician, without critically assessing the proposal's merits or potential consequences. The consequences of authority bias can be significant. In scientific research, for instance, the overvaluation of opinions from prominent figures may discourage dissenting views or innovative ideas that challenge established paradigms. This can slow down progress, as researchers might overlook or dismiss alternative explanations that, although less popular, could lead to breakthroughs. In the business world, authority bias can lead to the persistence of ineffective practices. If a well-respected executive insists on a particular strategy, the organization may continue to follow it despite clear signs that it is not working, simply because questioning the leader could be seen as a challenge to the established order. Moreover, authority bias plays a notable role in how information is disseminated and accepted in the media. When influential figures, such as celebrities, political leaders, or experts on television, present opinions or news, their messages are often taken at face value by the public. This phenomenon can contribute to the spread of misinformation, especially when these authorities are not held accountable for inaccuracies in their statements. Social media platforms can exacerbate this issue, as algorithms frequently amplify content from high-profile sources, reinforcing the notion that their messages are inherently more reliable than those from less prominent voices. Despite its pervasive influence, there are strategies to mitigate authority bias. One approach is to cultivate critical thinking skills that encourage individuals to assess information based on evidence and logic, rather than solely on the source. Educational initiatives that emphasize the importance of questioning and verifying claims can empower people to look beyond titles and positions of power. In professional settings, creating an environment that welcomes diverse viewpoints and encourages constructive debate can help counteract the tendency to accept authoritative opinions without challenge. For instance, organizations might implement anonymous feedback mechanisms or establish cross-functional teams where ideas are evaluated based on their merit rather than their origin. Another effective strategy is to promote transparency and accountability among authority figures. When leaders provide clear, evidence-based explanations for their decisions, it becomes easier for others to evaluate the validity of those decisions. This openness not only builds trust, but also reduces the likelihood that people will follow directives blindly. In contexts such as healthcare or public policy, fostering dialogue between experts and the community can lead to more nuanced understanding and better decision-making. By encouraging individuals to ask questions and seek out additional information, society as a whole can move toward a more balanced approach to authority. It is also important to recognize that authority bias does not imply that all authoritative opinions are wrong or that leaders should be disregarded. Instead, it highlights the need for a healthy skepticism that balances respect for expertise with the critical evaluation of the underlying evidence. Acknowledging that even experts can be fallible enables us to build more robust systems of knowledge. This mindset can lead to improved outcomes in various fields, from better clinical decisions in medicine to more effective policies in government. By ensuring that decisions are made based on sound reasoning rather than the uncritical acceptance of authority. In everyday life, being aware of authority bias can empower individuals to take a more active role in their own learning and decision-making processes. Whether it's evaluating a news story, considering the advice of a professional, or making personal choices, remembering to weigh evidence and consider alternative perspectives can lead to more informed and independent judgments. This awareness not only benefits the individual, but also contributes to a culture of openness and continuous improvement, where ideas are scrutinized and refined rather than accepted at face value. Fading affect bias is a psychological phenomenon in which the emotional intensity of negative memories diminishes faster over time than the emotional impact of positive memories. In other words, as time passes, the distressing emotions attached to unpleasant events tend to fade, while the joy and warmth associated with positive experiences linger much longer. This natural process helps us to move forward without being constantly burdened by past negative experiences, ultimately contributing to emotional resilience and overall well-being. Imagine recalling a time when you felt deeply embarrassed or hurt. Initially, the memory might trigger strong feelings of sadness, shame, or regret. However, after many years, you may find that while you still remember the details of what happened, the intensity of those negative emotions has considerably lessened. By contrast, moments of celebration, love, or success often retain their emotional richness, allowing the positive feelings to continue influencing your mood and outlook. This difference in emotional retention illustrates how our minds work to create a narrative that favors optimism and personal growth, even if it means rewriting the emotional weight of our past. The fading affect bias serves an important adaptive function. Life is full of challenges, setbacks, and painful experiences that, if left unchecked, could overwhelm our emotional resources. By allowing the negative affect to wane more quickly, our minds protect us from being mired in persistent negativity, making it easier to learn from mistakes without being paralyzed by regret. This process is not a deliberate act of denial. Rather, it is an unconscious mechanism that helps us balance the emotional scales. It allows us to remember the details of negative events, which can be useful for learning and avoiding future pitfalls, while simultaneously freeing up emotional energy to appreciate the good times. Research in cognitive psychology has shown that this bias is not uniform for every individual or every situation. Factors such as personal resilience, the context in which the memory was formed, and even cultural influences can shape the extent to which negative memories lose their emotional charge. For instance, people who practice mindfulness or engage in reflective journaling often report a greater ability to let go of past hurts, suggesting that awareness and deliberate emotional processing can enhance the effects of fading affect bias. Conversely, in cases of severe trauma, the fading of negative affect may not occur as effectively, sometimes resulting in conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder, where painful memories remain acutely vivid. One interesting aspect of fading affect bias is how it shapes our self-narratives and future expectations. When negative emotions associated with past failures or setbacks diminish, we are more likely to view our life story as one of growth and improvement. This can foster optimism and a positive self-image, as we begin to see that the pain we once felt does not define us forever. It also encourages us to take risks and embrace new experiences, because the emotional cost of failure appears lower in hindsight. At the same time, the sustained intensity of positive memories reinforces our motivation to pursue activities that bring joy and satisfaction, creating a feedback loop that prioritizes our well-being. However, the bias is not without its complexities. While the selective fading of negative emotions can be beneficial for personal growth and mental health, it might also lead to an underestimation of the lessons learned from past mistakes. If the negative affect fades too quickly, there is a risk that we may not fully appreciate the gravity of certain experiences, potentially making us more vulnerable to repeating them. This dynamic highlights the delicate balance our brains must achieve. On one hand, we need to forget enough of the pain to heal and move forward. On the other hand, we need to retain enough memory of negative experiences to learn from them and avoid future harm. In interpersonal relationships, fading affect bias plays a significant role in how we perceive conflicts and reconciliations. Over time, the sting of an argument or a betrayal can diminish, allowing us to forgive and rebuild trust. This emotional softening can be essential for maintaining long-term relationships, as it helps individuals let go of grudges and focus on the positive aspects of their connection. Yet it also underscores the importance of addressing issues as they arise, rather than relying solely on time to heal wounds. Proactive communication and conflict resolution can complement the natural fading of negative affect, leading to healthier and more resilient relationships. The influence of fading affect bias can also be observed in cultural and societal contexts. Societies that emphasize forgiveness and forward thinking tend to have narratives that encourage looking past historical grievances and focusing on collective progress. By acknowledging that the pain of past conflicts can diminish over time, communities are better positioned to foster reconciliation and build a more hopeful future. This cultural acceptance of change and renewal reflects a broader recognition of the human capacity to heal, adapt, and grow, principles that are deeply intertwined with the psychological mechanisms underlying fading affect bias. In practical terms, understanding fading affect bias can empower individuals to better manage their emotions and relationships. Recognizing that negative feelings are likely to diminish over time can provide comfort during periods of distress and encourage a more balanced perspective on life's ups and downs. It can also inspire deliberate practices that facilitate emotional healing, such as therapy, mindfulness meditation, or simply engaging in activities that reinforce positive experiences. By consciously embracing the natural tendency for negative emotions to fade, we can create space for more positive memories and emotions to flourish. Belief perseverance is a cognitive bias in which people cling to their initial beliefs, even when presented with new, compelling evidence that contradicts those beliefs. This tendency means that once we form an impression or make up our minds about something, it can be extraordinarily difficult to change our perspective, even when the facts suggest we should. The roots of belief perseverance lie in our need for consistency and the discomfort of cognitive dissonance, which arises when new information conflicts with what we already believe. Instead of revising our opinions, we often find ways to reinterpret or dismiss contradictory evidence, reinforcing our original stance. One reason belief perseverance is so persistent is that our initial beliefs are formed quickly, sometimes based on incomplete or even flawed information. Once established, these beliefs become a lens through which we view subsequent events. For example, if you initially believe that a particular brand of smartphone is unreliable because of a few negative reviews, you may continue to avoid that brand, even if later reviews and product updates provide clear evidence of improved performance. The early judgment remains influential because it creates a sort of mental shortcut, filtering the way you interpret all related information. In this way, the initial belief continues to shape your opinions and decisions, regardless of later evidence. Psychological research has demonstrated belief perseverance in various experiments where participants were asked to evaluate arguments or pieces of evidence. In many cases, even when subjects were later given strong evidence that refuted their original belief, they still clung to it. This phenomenon can be partly explained by the human desire to maintain a coherent self-image. Accepting new information that challenges long-held views forces us to reassess not only our beliefs, but also our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world, which can be an uncomfortable and destabilizing process. As a result, the mind often opts for the easier path, holding on to what it already knows. The effects of belief perseverance are evident in many areas of everyday life. In politics, for instance, individuals may steadfastly adhere to their party's positions, despite evidence of policy failures or contradictions, simply because changing their views would require them to admit that their previous opinions were misguided. Similarly, in interpersonal relationships, people might continue to hold negative impressions of others based on early interactions, even when later experiences clearly suggest that these impressions are inaccurate. In both cases, the bias can lead to entrenched attitudes that hinder open-minded discussion and adaptive decision-making. Belief perseverance is also closely linked to confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs and to discount information that contradicts them. When confronted with disconfirming evidence, we might engage in motivated reasoning, looking for ways to explain away the new data or questioning its credibility rather than reassessing our original views. This cycle not only reinforces the initial belief, but also creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where our understanding of the issue becomes increasingly skewed. The more we disregard conflicting evidence, the deeper our original beliefs take root, making them even harder to change in the future. Overcoming belief perseverance requires a conscious effort to remain open-minded and critically evaluate our own thought processes. One effective strategy is to actively seek out diverse perspectives and challenge our own assumptions. For example, if you hold a strong opinion on a social or political issue, intentionally exposing yourself to well-reasoned arguments from the other side can help temper your initial stance. Another approach is to practice reflective thinking, taking the time to consider why you hold a particular belief and whether it is truly supported by evidence. This kind of metacognition can help create a mental environment where changing one's mind is not seen as a weakness, but rather as a strength that reflects intellectual honesty and adaptability. Educational systems and professional environments can also play a role in mitigating belief perseverance, encouraging debates, promoting critical analysis, and fostering a culture of intellectual humility can all help individuals recognize that no single perspective holds all the answers. When people are taught to value evidence over personal conviction, they become better equipped to adjust their views in the face of new information. In practice, this means creating spaces where questioning and revising one's opinions are seen as part of the learning process rather than as betrayals of earlier commitments. The societal implications of belief perseverance are significant. When large groups of people cling to outdated or disproven beliefs, it can hinder progress on critical issues, from public health to environmental policy. For instance, public resistance to scientific findings, whether related to climate change, vaccination, or other areas, often stems from a reluctance to abandon long-held beliefs in favor of new evidence. This not only slows down the adoption of necessary measures, but also creates divisions that are difficult to bridge. Recognizing and addressing belief perseverance on a broader scale involves promoting scientific literacy, encouraging open dialogue, and creating institutional frameworks that value evidence-based decision-making. In summary, belief perseverance is a potent cognitive bias that illustrates our inherent resistance to change, even in the face of clear, contradictory evidence. It serves as a reminder that our first impressions and initial beliefs are not always reliable guides to truth. By cultivating habits of critical thinking, seeking out diverse viewpoints, and being willing to reassess our opinions, we can gradually overcome this bias. Such efforts not only enhance our personal growth and decision-making, but also contribute to a more informed, adaptable, and open-minded society, one that is better equipped to navigate the complexities of an ever-changing world. Information bias is the tendency to seek out additional information even when it does not improve the quality of the decision being made. At its core, this bias reflects our deep-seated belief that more information inherently leads to better decisions. In many situations, this drive to collect extra data is understandable. We want to be as informed as possible, feeling that every bit of information might offer a new insight or safeguard against potential risks. However, more information doesn't always translate to better decisions. Sometimes, it merely adds complexity and can even cloud judgment. Consider a scenario where a manager is faced with making a critical business decision. Instead of relying on key performance indicators and a clear set of decision criteria, the manager might insist on gathering exhaustive market research, customer surveys, and competitive analyses. While some additional data can be useful, beyond a certain point, the extra details may not meaningfully influence the decision. In fact, they can lead to analysis paralysis, where the decision-making process becomes so bogged down in data collection and interpretation that it delays action and reduces overall effectiveness. This phenomenon is often observed in everyday situations too, such as a consumer spending hours comparing online reviews and product specifications before making a purchase, even though the core decision might not be significantly affected by minor differences in features. One reason behind information bias is our natural desire for certainty. In a world filled with uncertainty, gathering more data can feel like a way to exert control over outcomes. When we have more information, we feel more prepared and less vulnerable to the unexpected. This drive, however, can be counterproductive because it sometimes leads us to collect information that is redundant, irrelevant, or even misleading. In our quest for certainty, we may overvalue minor details and lose sight of the bigger picture. For instance, an investor might obsess over daily fluctuations in stock prices, even though the long-term performance of the investment is influenced by broader market trends and fundamental factors. The extra data may create the illusion of a deeper understanding without actually enhancing the decision's quality. The impact of information bias extends into various fields. In healthcare, for example, patients might search for every available piece of information about their symptoms online. While being informed about one's health is important, excessive information can lead to unnecessary anxiety, misdiagnosis, or even self-treatment based on incomplete or misunderstood data. Similarly, in the legal realm, lawyers may sift through vast amounts of case law and precedent, sometimes drowning in details that do not substantially affect the outcome of a case. The key issue in all these examples is not the availability of data, but the ability to distinguish between what is truly relevant and what merely adds noise to the decision-making process. Another aspect of information bias is its contribution to cognitive overload. Our brains have limited capacity for processing information at any one time. When we overwhelm ourselves with data, it can lead to decision fatigue, where the mental energy required to sift through and evaluate all the details becomes so draining that our ability to make clear, reasoned decisions diminishes. Instead of clarifying the situation, too much information can blur the critical factors, making it harder to identify the most important elements that should influence our choice. Overcoming information bias involves a combination of self-awareness and strategic decision-making. One effective approach is to set clear criteria for what information is necessary to make a good decision before beginning the research process. By defining the key metrics or factors that matter, it becomes easier to filter out extraneous details and focus on data that has real decision-making value. Techniques like decision trees or cost-benefit analysis can help structure the process so that only the most relevant information is considered. Additionally, embracing a mindset that acknowledges the law of diminishing returns, recognizing that after a certain point, additional information yields progressively smaller benefits, can help temper the urge to overgather data. In professional settings, organizations can implement policies that encourage efficiency in information gathering. For example, project teams might be required to present a summary of critical findings rather than exhaustive reports, thereby fostering a culture where quality trumps quantity. Training in critical thinking and data analysis can also empower individuals to assess the utility of additional information more effectively. On a personal level, learning to trust one's intuition and prior experience can sometimes be more valuable than seeking endless details, especially when time is of the essence. Ultimately, information bias reminds us that while data is a powerful tool, its value depends on how it is used. The goal is not to shun information altogether, but to develop the discernment to identify which pieces of information truly enhance our understanding and which ones are superfluous. By balancing the desire for thoroughness with the need for decisiveness, we can make more informed and effective decisions without falling into the trap of over-information. Recognizing this bias is a crucial step toward cultivating a more streamlined, rational approach to decision-making, one that leverages essential insights while avoiding the pitfalls of unnecessary data overload. Decision fatigue is a psychological phenomenon describing how the quality of our decisions deteriorates after we have made many choices over a period of time. Essentially, our ability to process and evaluate options is not infinite. As we make decisions throughout the day, our mental energy is gradually depleted. This depletion often leads us to rely on simpler, less thought-out methods of decision-making as the day wears on, which can result in choices that are more impulsive, less reflective, or simply not as well considered as they might be earlier on. At its core, decision fatigue arises because decision-making requires cognitive effort. Each time we weigh options, deliberate pros and cons, or choose between alternatives, we tap into a limited reserve of mental resources. Early in the day, when our minds are fresh, we tend to be thorough and analytical. However, as we accumulate choices, ranging from major career moves to everyday decisions like what to eat for lunch or which route to take to work, our cognitive resources diminish. With fewer mental resources available, we are more likely to choose the default option, rely on habits, or even postpone decisions altogether. Consider a busy professional who starts the day by making a series of important strategic decisions. Initially, they might evaluate every option carefully, but as the day progresses and a barrage of smaller decisions, responding to emails, scheduling meetings, and choosing dinner plans adds up, their decision-making quality can decline. This can lead to what is known as analysis paralysis, where the individual becomes overwhelmed by choices and finds it increasingly difficult to commit to a decision. Alternatively, the professional might opt for the easiest or most familiar option, even if it's not the best one, simply because their mental energy is running low. Research in cognitive psychology has documented the impacts of decision fatigue in various settings. In consumer behavior, for example, shoppers facing endless options might become less discerning as they near the end of a long shopping trip. They might settle for a purchase that isn't ideal, simply because they are too tired to evaluate all the alternatives thoroughly. In high-pressure environments like hospitals or courtrooms, professionals might make suboptimal decisions later in a long day, potentially affecting outcomes in critical situations. The consequences of decision fatigue are significant because they highlight that our ability to choose wisely is not static, but is affected by the cumulative toll of our daily decisions. There are several practical strategies to mitigate decision fatigue. One effective approach is to simplify routine decisions. Many successful individuals structure their days by minimizing trivial choices. For example, by wearing a uniform or having a set meal plan. This practice helps preserve cognitive energy for more important decisions. Prioritizing tasks is another useful tactic. Scheduling the most critical or complex decisions for times when you are most alert, typically in the morning, can lead to better outcomes. Moreover, taking regular breaks throughout the day allows your brain to rest and recover, preventing mental exhaustion from building up. Another strategy involves setting clear criteria or using decision-making frameworks to guide choices. By predefining what factors are most important, you reduce the mental effort needed to weigh every option. This approach not only speeds up the decision process, but also ensures that choices are made based on consistent standards, even when cognitive resources are low. In both personal and professional contexts, creating environments that support efficient decision-making, such as delegating routine choices or automating them with technology, can significantly alleviate the burden on your mental energy. Understanding decision fatigue also calls for greater self-compassion. It's important to recognize that feeling mentally drained after a series of decisions is normal. Rather than judging yourself harshly for making a suboptimal choice later in the day, acknowledging that you are experiencing cognitive depletion can help you adopt better strategies for recovery and self-care. This recognition is especially valuable in high-stress occupations, where the cost of poor decisions can be significant. In addition to individual strategies, organizations can help reduce decision fatigue among employees by streamlining processes and reducing unnecessary choices. For instance, creating standardized procedures or checklists for routine tasks can help employees conserve cognitive energy for more complex challenges. When companies invest in systems that minimize decision overload, they not only improve efficiency, but also support better overall decision quality and job satisfaction. Ultimately, decision fatigue is a reminder that while we may pride ourselves on being rational decision makers, our cognitive resources are limited. The more decisions we make, the more likely we are to experience a decline in judgment and clarity. By acknowledging this limitation and employing strategies to manage our mental energy, such as simplifying routine choices, prioritizing important tasks, and taking regular breaks, we can help ensure that our decisions remain sound, even in the midst of an overwhelming number of options. Recognizing and addressing decision fatigue not only enhances our individual well-being, but also improves the quality of outcomes in our personal lives, our workplaces, and the broader society. Embracing these strategies allows us to strike a balance between the demands of our modern, choice-saturated lives and the need to maintain a clear, focused mind. With conscious effort and thoughtful planning, we can mitigate the effects of decision fatigue and make decisions that truly reflect our best judgment, ensuring that we remain effective and resilient in a world full of endless options. Illusory superiority is a cognitive bias where individuals tend to overestimate their own abilities, qualities, or performance in comparison to others. This phenomenon, often referred to as the above-average effect, is a common feature of human psychology. For instance, many people believe they are better drivers, more ethical, or more intelligent than the average person, even though statistically this can't be true for everyone. Our self-assessments are frequently inflated because we pay more attention to our successes and favorable traits, while downplaying our shortcomings. This bias is rooted in several psychological mechanisms. One key element is the self-serving bias, where people attribute their successes to internal factors, like skill or effort, and blame failures on external circumstances. Such a pattern of thinking naturally leads to an inflated self-image, because our minds are wired to protect our self-esteem. Additionally, selective memory plays a role. Remembering our good decisions and forgetting mistakes makes us more likely to view ourselves in a positive light. As a result, when asked to compare ourselves to others, we rely on this skewed internal record, which paints us as superior. Research in social psychology has repeatedly demonstrated the prevalence of illusory superiority. In various studies, participants were asked to rate their abilities in areas such as driving, leadership, and problem-solving. Consistently, the majority of individuals rated themselves above average. For example, in surveys about driving skills, most respondents believed they were safer or more skilled drivers than the typical motorist, despite accident statistics suggesting that only a minority can actually be above average. This pattern is not limited to any one culture or context. It is a widespread human tendency that appears to be nearly universal. The implications of illusory superiority are far-reaching. In personal development, overestimating one's abilities can lead to a lack of motivation for self-improvement, because if you believe you're already above average, why try to get better? In professional settings, this bias may result in overconfidence, leading individuals to make decisions without adequate input or consideration of alternative perspectives. This overconfidence can, in turn, affect teamwork and collaboration, as those who overrate their own abilities might underestimate the contributions of others, potentially causing conflicts or reducing overall group performance. In educational environments, students who overestimate their competence might not study as hard or seek help when needed, believing that they inherently understand the material better than their peers. Over time, this can lead to significant gaps in learning and personal growth. Similarly, in leadership positions, an inflated sense of ability can result in poor decision-making, as leaders might ignore critical feedback or alternative strategies, ultimately impacting the success of their organizations. Interestingly, illusory superiority is not necessarily a sign of arrogance or narcissism. It is often a subconscious mechanism designed to maintain a positive self-image. Many people are unaware of the degree to which this bias influences their thinking. Even when presented with objective measures of performance, individuals often discount evidence that contradicts their self-assessment. This resistance to change underscores the powerful role that cognitive biases play in shaping our perceptions of ourselves. Overcoming illusory superiority requires a conscious effort to engage in self-reflection and to seek out objective feedback. One effective strategy is to actively solicit constructive criticism from peers, mentors, or supervisors. When we allow ourselves to be evaluated by others and compare those evaluations with our own perceptions, we may begin to see a more balanced view of our abilities. Engaging in practices such as mindfulness or journaling can also help individuals become more aware of their thought patterns and the discrepancies between their self-assessments and reality. Moreover, cultivating a growth mindset, a belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed over time, can mitigate the negative aspects of illusory superiority. By recognizing that there is always room for improvement, individuals are more likely to view feedback as an opportunity for learning rather than as a threat to their self-image. This shift in perspective not only promotes personal development, but also enhances the quality of our interactions with others, fostering environments where diverse skills and viewpoints are valued. The consequences of unchecked illusory superiority can extend into broader societal issues as well. When large groups or communities share inflated views of their abilities, it can lead to collective overconfidence and even social or political unrest. Decision-making at the group level may suffer if leaders or members overestimate their competence and dismiss external advice or dissenting opinions. This dynamic can contribute to polarization and hinder the effective resolution of problems that require collaboration and humility. Ultimately, while a certain degree of self-confidence is beneficial and necessary for achieving success, it is crucial to remain open to self-improvement and critical evaluation. Illusory superiority reminds us that our perceptions of ourselves are not always accurate, and that ongoing learning and self-assessment are essential. By recognizing and addressing this bias, we can better align our self-perceptions with reality, leading to more effective decision-making, richer personal development, and more harmonious relationships in both our professional and personal lives. Understanding illusory superiority encourages us to strike a balance between confidence and humility. It teaches us that while it is important to believe in our abilities, acknowledging our limitations is equally vital. Through mindful self-reflection, openness to feedback, and a commitment to continuous improvement, we can counteract the effects of this bias. In doing so, we not only enhance our own growth, but also contribute to more collaborative and adaptive communities, where realistic self-assessment and mutual respect pave the way for collective success. Egocentric bias is a cognitive tendency in which individuals interpret and evaluate events primarily from their own personal perspective, often leading to a skewed understanding of the situation that neglects other viewpoints. This bias can cause us to overemphasize our own experiences and emotions, making our interpretations seem universally applicable even when they are highly subjective. In everyday life, egocentric bias manifests in the way we recall past events, form opinions, and interact with others, often resulting in one-sided perceptions that can influence our decisions and relationships. At its core, egocentric bias is rooted in the fact that we have immediate, detailed access to our own thoughts and feelings, while the internal experiences of others remain largely hidden. Because our personal experiences are so salient, we naturally assume that others see the world in a similar way. For example, when recounting an event, we might believe that everyone involved shared our interpretation of what happened, even if their perspectives differ significantly. This bias is not inherently malicious. Rather, it is a natural byproduct of our self-centered cognitive processing. Our brains are wired to prioritize our own point of view, which can sometimes lead to overconfidence in our judgments and a diminished appreciation for the complexity of others' experiences. The influence of egocentric bias can be observed in a variety of contexts. In interpersonal relationships, for instance, it may lead to misunderstandings and conflicts when one person assumes that their feelings or opinions are shared by their friends or partners. When disagreements arise, the egocentric individual might interpret neutral or ambiguous actions as being directed against them, simply because they assume that everyone should react as they would in a given situation. Similarly, in group settings, egocentric bias can hinder effective collaboration. Team members might overestimate the alignment between their own goals and those of the group, leading to decisions that do not fully consider alternative perspectives or the diverse needs of all participants. Research in social psychology has shed light on the prevalence of egocentric bias in various domains. Studies have shown that when people are asked to recall past events, they tend to remember details that confirm their own role in the narrative, often overlooking or misinterpreting aspects that don't align with their self-image. This selective memory reinforces the notion that our own perspectives are the most accurate, even when objective evidence suggests otherwise. For example, in a work environment, an employee might believe that their contributions are the primary reason for a project's success, while underestimating the roles played by colleagues. Such overemphasis on personal involvement can foster an inflated sense of self-worth, which may ultimately lead to interpersonal friction or even hinder collective problem-solving. Egocentric bias also plays a significant role in how we process feedback and learn from our mistakes. When receiving criticism, individuals with a strong egocentric bias might dismiss negative comments as misunderstandings or attribute them to external factors rather than reflecting on their own behavior. This resistance to external viewpoints can stunt personal growth and make it challenging to adapt or improve. In extreme cases, egocentric bias may contribute to a persistent reluctance to change, as individuals remain convinced that their way of thinking is not only valid, but superior to that of others. The societal implications of egocentric bias are far-reaching. In the realm of politics, for instance, this bias can exacerbate polarization by reinforcing the belief that one's own ideological stance is not only correct, but also the natural perspective for everyone. Politicians and media outlets may exploit egocentric tendencies by presenting information in a way that resonates with the personal experiences of their audience, thereby deepening divides and reducing the likelihood of meaningful dialogue across differing viewpoints. In the age of social media, where echo chambers and personalized news feeds are common, egocentric bias is further amplified, making it more difficult for people to appreciate the complexity and diversity of experiences that exist beyond their immediate circle. Overcoming egocentric bias requires a conscious effort to step outside one's own perspective and actively seek out the views of others. One effective strategy is to practice empathy, making a deliberate effort to understand how someone else might feel or think in a given situation. Engaging in open and honest conversations, where differing viewpoints are respectfully considered, can also help challenge the assumption that one's own perspective is universally shared. In professional settings, encouraging diverse teams and creating environments that value varied opinions can mitigate the effects of egocentric bias, leading to more balanced decision-making and innovative problem-solving. Another practical approach is to cultivate reflective thinking by regularly questioning our assumptions and examining how our personal experiences might be influencing our perceptions. we can begin to recognize the limitations of our own perspective. Techniques such as journaling or mindfulness meditation can be useful in this regard, as they encourage us to observe our thoughts without immediately accepting them as absolute truth. Over time, this practice can lead to a more nuanced understanding of the world, one that appreciates the rich tapestry of experiences and viewpoints that exist outside of our own. The affect heuristic is a mental shortcut where our emotions play a dominant role in decision-making, often replacing a careful, rational analysis with an immediate, gut-level response. When we rely on this heuristic, our feelings, whether positive or negative, color our evaluation of risks and benefits, leading us to make choices based more on emotional reactions than on a detailed assessment of facts. This process is deeply rooted in human evolution. In many situations, swift decisions guided by instinct were crucial for survival. However, in today's complex world, where decisions can have far-reaching consequences, the affect heuristic can sometimes steer us in less optimal directions. Imagine walking into a store and being instantly drawn to a product simply because its packaging evokes warm, nostalgic memories. Even if the product is no better than its competitors, the emotional connection can make it seem superior. Similarly, when reading news stories, a sensational headline may trigger a strong emotional response that overshadows a careful consideration of the underlying statistics or context. In both cases, our emotions act as a filter, amplifying certain aspects of the information while diminishing others. This emotional lens can be particularly powerful when it comes to evaluating risks. If a situation makes us feel safe and comfortable, we might underestimate potential dangers. Conversely, if it evokes fear or anxiety, we may overestimate the risks involved. One significant area where the affect heuristic is evident is in financial decision-making. Investors might be swayed by a charismatic spokesperson or an optimistic market outlook that elicits positive feelings, rather than by a sober analysis of economic indicators. As a result, they might pour money into ventures that promise excitement and growth, while ignoring warning signs that a more balanced evaluation would have revealed. This emotional bias can lead to market bubbles, where investments are driven more by sentiment than by solid fundamentals. In a similar vein, insurance decisions are often influenced by how a potential loss makes us feel. The fear of a rare but dramatic event can lead to overinsuring against unlikely risks, while more common hazards may be underestimated if they don't evoke the same emotional intensity. The affect heuristic also plays a central role in everyday interpersonal decisions. Consider how a person's charisma or friendliness can lead us to judge them more favorably, even if their skills or experience are not exceptional. This halo effect is partly driven by the affect heuristic, as our positive emotions toward one aspect of a person cause us to overlook or downplay their shortcomings in other areas. In political contexts, too, voters may be drawn to candidates who inspire strong emotional responses through powerful speeches or relatable stories, rather than to those whose policies are most rigorously defined by data. The result is that choices in these spheres are often made on the basis of how a candidate or idea makes us feel, rather than on a critical assessment of its merits. Moreover, the affect heuristic can sometimes lead to impulsive decisions, especially when our emotional state is heightened. After a stressful day, for example, a person might opt for immediate gratification, such as an unhealthy snack or an unplanned purchase, as a way to quickly alleviate negative emotions. even if they know these choices are not aligned with their long-term goals. In these moments, the emotional relief provided by the immediate choice is given more weight than a thoughtful consideration of the consequences, leading to decisions that may need to be regretted later. This interplay between emotion and decision-making underscores the power of the affect heuristic in shaping our behavior, often outside of our conscious awareness. Despite its potential downsides, the affect heuristic is not entirely negative. It allows us to make rapid decisions in situations where time is of the essence, and it can help simplify complex choices by reducing the amount of cognitive effort required. In many cases, our emotions can provide valuable, albeit subjective information about our preferences and values. The key challenge is recognizing when our feelings are leading us astray, when they obscure critical facts or override reasoned judgment, and finding ways to strike a balance between emotion and logic. One strategy for mitigating the influence of the affect heuristic is to cultivate a habit of pausing before making important decisions. Taking a moment to reflect on whether our immediate emotional reaction is clouding our judgment can be immensely valuable. Techniques such as mindfulness meditation or journaling can help us become more aware of our emotional states and how they might be impacting our choices. Additionally, seeking out objective data and consulting with trusted advisors can provide a counterbalance to our subjective feelings. By deliberately considering both the emotional and rational dimensions of a decision, we can arrive at more balanced, well-informed outcomes. Another effective approach is to practice structured decision-making. This might involve listing the pros and cons of various options, evaluating the potential risks and benefits, and assigning weights to different factors based on their long-term importance. Such methods can help move the focus away from transient emotional reactions and ensure that the decision process is guided by more stable, evidence-based criteria. In professional settings, organizations can benefit from training programs that emphasize critical thinking and emotional intelligence, helping team members recognize when the affect heuristic might be influencing their decisions. Projection bias is a cognitive tendency where we assume that others share our own beliefs, values, or feelings, often without any real evidence to support that assumption. This bias can subtly shape how we interact with people, make decisions, and even form opinions about groups or societal issues. Essentially, because our own perspective is the one we know best, we naturally project it onto others, mistakenly believing that our experiences, emotions, and thought processes are universal. At its core, projection bias stems from the fact that our internal world is always available to us. Our feelings, preferences, and beliefs are highly salient, and they influence how we interpret our surroundings. For example, if you're feeling optimistic about a new opportunity, you might assume that others are equally excited. Or if you have a strong political stance, you might expect that most people around you share a similar viewpoint. This assumption isn't always intentional or malicious. It's simply the result of our mind using our own perspective as the baseline for understanding the world. However, this can lead to misunderstandings and miscommunications, as it overlooks the diversity of experiences and opinions that exist outside our personal bubble. One everyday example of projection bias occurs in social interactions. Imagine planning a weekend outing with friends and being excited about a particular restaurant that you love. You might assume that everyone else will appreciate the same cuisine or vibe. Yet, when you get together, you may find that some friends have very different tastes or dietary restrictions. Your projection of your own preferences onto the group can lead to choices that aren't enjoyable for everyone. Similarly, in work settings, if you're passionate about a new project idea, you might overestimate the enthusiasm your colleagues will have, only to encounter resistance or indifference when your idea is discussed. This mismatch between expectation and reality is a classic demonstration of projection bias at work. Psychologically, projection bias is linked to our natural inclination to simplify complex social environments. Since our personal experiences are readily accessible, they become a convenient shortcut for predicting how others might behave or feel. This heuristic saves time and mental energy, but it comes with the risk of oversimplification. Our brains, wired to favor consistency and familiarity, often assume that what is true for us must be true for others as well, even when cultural, social, or individual differences suggest otherwise. Research in social psychology has shown that this bias can lead to overconfidence in our judgments about others, making us less receptive to alternative perspectives, and potentially fueling conflicts in both personal and professional realms. The consequences of projection bias can be wide-ranging. In interpersonal relationships, it might result in the misinterpretation of someone's behavior. For instance, if you value direct communication and assume everyone does too, you might view a more reserved or indirect style as disinterest or evasiveness, when in fact, it's simply a different way of expressing oneself. In broader social and political contexts, projection bias can contribute to polarization. When groups assume that their own beliefs are normative, they may struggle to understand or empathize with opposing viewpoints. This can create echo chambers where dissent is seen as abnormal or even threatening, thereby deepening societal divides. Projection bias also plays a role in consumer behavior. Marketers, for example, often exploit this tendency by crafting messages that assume a shared set of values or experiences. When a commercial depicts a family enjoying a particular product, it implicitly suggests that most people have a similar, positive family experience, which may not be true for everyone. Consumers who don't relate to the portrayed scenario might dismiss the product or feel alienated by the advertisement. Conversely, those who do identify with the message might overestimate the product's relevance or benefits because it seems to confirm their own lifestyle and preferences. Mitigating projection bias requires a conscious effort to step outside of our own perspective and actively consider the diverse viewpoints and experiences of others. One effective strategy is to practice active listening, which involves really focusing on what others are saying without immediately filtering their words through our own beliefs. When engaging in conversations, whether in personal relationships or in professional settings, it can be helpful to ask clarifying questions and invite alternative viewpoints. This not only enriches the conversation, but also helps to reveal that others may see the world very differently. Another useful approach is to seek out experiences and information that challenge our assumptions. This might involve reading literature, watching documentaries, or simply spending time with people from different cultural or social backgrounds. By intentionally exposing ourselves to a variety of perspectives, we can begin to recognize the limits of our own experience and adjust our expectations accordingly. In educational and professional settings, fostering an environment where diverse opinions are encouraged can reduce the impact of projection bias. When decision-making processes include input from a wide range of voices, the risk of assuming that one's own perspective is universal is minimized. Reflective practices can also play an important role. Taking time to question why we assume others share our views, perhaps through journaling or mindfulness exercises, can help illuminate our own biases. For example, if you find yourself frustrated by someone's disagreement with you, pausing to consider that they might have different life experiences or values can be a valuable exercise in humility and understanding. Over time, this practice can lead to more balanced judgments and improve both personal relationships and group dynamics. Outcome bias is a cognitive distortion where the quality of a decision is judged solely based on its outcome, rather than on the process, reasoning, or effort that led to it. In other words, we often evaluate decisions not by how well they were made at the time, but by the eventual result, good or bad. This bias can distort our understanding of decision-making, making us prone to overlook the context in which choices were made. For instance, a decision that turns out well might be seen as inherently sound, even if it was made with flawed reasoning or insufficient data. Conversely, a poor outcome might lead us to harshly criticize the decision, despite the fact that the decision-making process was robust and reasonable under the circumstances. The roots of outcome bias lie in our natural tendency to seek simplicity and clarity in assessing complex situations. When an outcome is known, it can overshadow the nuances of how the decision was reached. Our minds gravitate toward the tangible result, using it as a proxy for decision quality. This shortcut might serve us well in some situations. After all, we often desire to celebrate successes and learn from failures, but it can also lead to unfair judgments. For example, a manager might be criticized for a project failure without acknowledging that all available information and proper risk assessments were considered at the time of the decision. In this way, outcome bias can obscure the fact that even well-considered decisions can lead to negative outcomes because of unpredictable variables or external factors beyond anyone's control. One common domain where outcome bias is particularly evident is in the field of sports. Coaches and athletes are often evaluated based on wins and losses. However, a game lost due to an unforeseen injury or an unexpected twist in play doesn't necessarily mean that the coach's strategy was flawed. Yet, fans and commentators might label the decision-making as poor solely because the final score was unfavorable. Similarly, in the business world, entrepreneurs might receive undue praise when a risky venture succeeds, while those same decisions are harshly judged when the venture fails. Even if market volatility or sudden changes in consumer behavior played a significant role, this focus on outcomes rather than processes can lead to an oversimplified view of success and failure. Outcome bias also affects our personal lives. Consider the case of financial decisions, such as investing. An investor might choose a particular portfolio based on careful analysis and diversification, but if the market unexpectedly crashes, the decision may be viewed as a mistake. Conversely, a less rigorous investment approach might be lauded if the market happens to perform well, even though the underlying strategy was not sound. This bias can hinder learning because it shifts attention away from the critical evaluation of the decision-making process. Instead of analyzing what worked or didn't work, we focus on the end result, thereby missing opportunities to refine our judgment and improve future decisions. The implications of outcome bias extend into areas like policymaking and legal judgments. In the realm of public policy, a decision to implement a particular program may be criticized if it fails to produce the desired results, regardless of the sound reasoning and data that supported its creation. Policymakers might be unfairly blamed for outcomes influenced by factors outside their control, such as economic downturns or natural disasters. In legal contexts, jurors sometimes fall prey to outcome bias by attributing greater fault to a defendant if a negative outcome occurred, even if the defendant's actions were not the primary cause of that outcome. This can lead to a skewed perception of responsibility and fairness. Mitigating outcome bias requires a shift in focus from the final result to the quality of the decision-making process itself. One strategy is to adopt a process-oriented mindset that values the reasoning, data analysis, and foresight that went into making a decision. By evaluating decisions on the basis of the information available at the time and the methods used, rather than on the outcome alone, we can gain a more nuanced understanding of what constitutes good decision-making. For instance, organizations can implement post-mortem analyses or after-action reviews that assess the decision process independent of the outcome. These evaluations can highlight strengths and weaknesses, fostering a culture of continuous improvement rather than one of simple success or failure. Another important approach is to build awareness of the external factors that might have influenced an outcome. Recognizing that chance, uncertainty, and unforeseen events play a significant role in the final result can help temper our judgments. It encourages decision-makers to appreciate that even the most well-informed choices can lead to unfavorable outcomes when subjected to random events. By developing a more balanced perspective, both individuals and organizations can learn to separate the quality of their decision-making process from the vagaries of fate. In everyday life, cultivating this awareness can lead to more resilient attitudes. When we understand that outcomes are not solely the product of our choices, we are better prepared to handle setbacks and failures. It fosters an environment where learning from mistakes becomes the priority, rather than assigning blame based solely on results. Embracing outcome bias as a natural cognitive tendency and actively working against it can encourage a more thoughtful, fair, and ultimately effective approach to decision-making. Ultimately, outcome bias serves as a reminder that decisions should be evaluated on the merit of the process and the logic behind them, rather than the unpredictable nature of their results. By shifting our focus from outcomes to processes, we not only promote better decision-making, but also create a culture that values learning and growth over simplistic judgments. Whether in personal decisions, professional strategies, or public policies, recognizing and addressing outcome bias is key to developing a more balanced and informed approach to understanding the complexities of success and failure.